No, please.
You kept the best.
That's fine.
The famous girl.
Oh, that's who's named?
Yes, thank you.
Do I need to load software for this thing to work?
No.
It's coming.
If it's not red circle, that's generally a very
There you go. It's on.
Thanks. It just came up. I don't know. Someone brought. Just want to make sure this one.
Well, we have only 2 members.
Oh, yeah, it's not connecting still, so
It's
that's
so frustrating. I was just.
Yeah, I know
So I
there was
guess we
3
should
this
just plan
coming.
on not, they'll be doing that, not projecting anything.
I guess.
Oh yeah, the library meeting.
So when you talk to Eileen, then
Since Cindy came, he will be there too. So.
Okay. I don't plan on it either. I don't plan on stuff.
Oh, no.
I got the same plan, Howard. I have no interest in going back.
Thank you, sir.
I've got uncollected.
It's even crazier than
I just said that to Jeremiah on purpose and especially
it was even reasonable that.
Projects.
I'm especially
he was probably trying to make sure that
I said I noticed that especially if I was
It's not worth it. It's definitely not worth it.
year 4, that's really
Yeah. We'll see what happens. But yeah, it just is accelerating something. It's crazy.
Well, do you want to?
It's here. I'm in the process of cleaning.
Do you want to wait for it? Yeah, they will.
First year.
Thank you.
Is this too?
I don't have these papers all mixed up. I put so many parades.
Give them a second.
He was at plans and stuff sometimes, and I said, the first thing I said, don't get them on.
Honestly, it didn't load for.
And then I need to go back, and I got them half of it just gets to be, well, and then because I wasn't at the last meeting, I got those materials out, and I was looking at something in there, and then I realized I had mixed them in, so then I had to go.
Right.
Oh, and I go through the last.
How are you?
This time's good. I don't, what you
But if you have any questions for me, I'm here to answer any questions.
I don't know your presentation, I wanted to look at that stuff.
Okay, got it. Eileen, it is working now.
Now it's
So we can,
Excellent, thank you.
after they're done with their screen, then we can.
And I'm not gonna project my memo, I'm just gonna talk through all of the copies.
Oh, okay.
I figured it's not that exciting.
That would change that? Do they have to take all of that into account? I mean, like, yeah, if you do a, I don't know if they can do this. I don't know what they can do.
Huh?
Can they put like,
Congratulations, I didn't see your last year, so I was at the
oh, if they add to the house,
We need to see
that
IMAP
has
for
to be
anything.
calculated through all of it.
Well, there are quite a few people.
That's good to have on there in case you need it. Whatever. I used it because I it's all I could load.
Kurt and David, they both.
So you went to one of these tabs and it was there,
Yeah, it was already up.
but it wasn't.
Okay. Okay, Kurt is there. Okay. Okay, there we are. So.
Never clicked on one.
I'll average them.
Isn't that something?
Well, welcome you all to the Middleton City Hall. I'm going to call the meeting of the Middleton Plan Commission for Tuesday, March 13, 2018 to order. So the first item on the agenda is the roll call.
Well, I've taken it, while I was sitting here, and there are 6 present and 1 absent. Dorn is absent.
Okay, all right. So the next item is the minutes, approval of the minutes.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion to approve the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes unanimously. So what can we take now? We can
We
start.
could
at
do
7.
Willie Street, number 3, design review.
Okay,
And you do have 2 people here registering in support without speaking, or wish to speak in support, 1 person.
okay.
Well, and I've got some.
For Willie Street?
Yep.
Okay.
And it's not a public hearing
No,
for
it's not
the
a public
design.
hearing.
So
Review.
do we
I can just
allow
give a
them to
quick
speak
staff.
or what?
Oh, no, Abby can give us.
I can
that.
just give the quick staff
Okay.
update. This is quite a straightforward request. Willie Street is expanding into an adjoining tenant space.
No, actually.
And is requesting approval of design review for some building facade modifications that would make it quite similar to the existing facade. It's the same material, cedar shiplap siding. And our staff recommendation is for approval.
Move approval.
Any discussion? Can we allow people to speak at this time?
Well, this might be the applicant, I think, so I'm not sure. Or maybe not, sorry. If there's, unless the applicant wants to speak.
Is the applicant here? Anna first.
Anya,
If you want to speak, you are welcome.
but you might not want to.
Otherwise, they've already made the motion to
Yeah.
approve it.
Looks nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ready to go.
Yeah.
Any,
I'm Dan Haro, I'm
Okay.
representing Willie Street Co-op.
okay,
I just wanted to just say that the area that's affected. Matt Aro with Aro Eberly Architects, representing the co-op. The area that's affected is the former UPS store, which the co-op is taking over as part of their expansion. And we're just extending the facade several feet to the west and using the same materials as was mentioned. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
any questions? Okay, well, thank you. So then the motion is to approve the design review for Willie Street Co-op. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. So it is 7:05, all right? It's 7:05, and I'm going to open the public hearing for the request for rezoning from Office District B1 to Plan Development District General Implementation Plan for Ostringer Mixed Use Development. These are the properties 6814, 6818, and 6824 on the University Avenue.
And we have received 2
Right.
registrations. One is registering in opposition without speaking, and one is wishing to speak other position.
Okay, all right.
There may
so-
be other
There may be
registrations
other
too.
people that
Yeah.
haven't passed in.
Mayor,
Yeah.
I wrote the staff comments. Did you want to, may I address that, or do you want to proceed differently?
Okay, well, okay, go ahead, start with the staff comment.
So, in your packets is my staff report. The request is to rezone 30,958 square feet, or about 0.71 acres, from B1 office to PDD GIP, that's Plan Development District General Implementation Plan. As you noted, it's by Ostringer Capital Group. I know that the applicant is here and wished to make a few remarks at the start of the public hearing, and so I will defer to him, if that's okay with you, Mayor.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Mark Ott from JLA Architects. I'm here representing Anthony Gray and Ostringer Capital Group on this project. So we're very excited to come forward and present this project. We think it's a phenomenal project for the perfect location. I'm actually glad that we followed Willie Street Co-op because that's part of why we're here. It's a up and coming neighborhood. It's a great location, highly desired, I believe, starting now and in the future, as Willie Street Co-op has shown with their success and expansion coming up. This is a great place to be, and Anthony's recognized that with this project. So going forward, what we have we'll show here is in your committee packet, and it's on screen. So the first thing here is just kind of the general rendering of what the building would look like. We're proposing a 4-story mixed-use building, and we'll go through the details on a current lot, some infill lots. There's actually 3 lots that Anthony owns, and we'll be joining into one parcel. And one of the really great parts about this project is the fact that we're saving the existing cottage, which actually is what Anthony's office currently is in. And we'll go through some of those details. So as, for those who don't know, the project's located right on University Avenue. Again, right directly across from Willie Street Co-op, Middleton Sport Bowl. As you can see, there is, as we get kind of into the existing site plan, again, there's a conglomerate of different buildings there. I can't really put the highlighter on the screens, it won't work. But there's Anthony's cottage that's along there with a garage. It used to be a daycare some years ago. Anthony has subsequently renovated the inside, and there's more additional exterior renovations to come with new windows and et cetera coming up. There is a Buzz, what's Buzz's last name? I forget. Men's, if you're looking at it on screen here, he would be to the left, which has some office, some spaces in there, chiropractor and et cetera. Yep, so there's the existing cottage. We have Nissan Insurance, and then an office building to the right. So as we go forward, oops, too many. You're okay, Mark, it's all right. So the new site plan would include just the taking down of the existing two-stall residential garage that's there next to the cottage, kind of at the back, and actually then putting the new existing building around the cottage. So we think that's a really great use of not just clear cutting the lot and trying to retain some scale and balance along the street. One of the interesting parts too that we're using and working through all the details is there's an existing easement between Buzz's property, which again is on our left, and our property, that we are actually taking 3 curb cuts and combining them into 2, trying to reduce the number of access points on University Avenue and use a shared ingress-egress with his Buzz's property, bringing his parking lot up, cleaning it up, bringing it up to a more modern layout, and again, trying to share that access. So trying to work with our neighbors on the property to reduce the amount of ingress and egress points. As we go through, so kind of the highlights now of the building itself, we've got really 2 different levels of underground parking. I'll just jump back. We actually have a entry point at grade, which is kind of about midway back of that drive aisle on the left side there. And then as we get to the back of the building, it dives down and actually goes down to their underground parking, which we have here. So we have a full level of underground parking, 34 current parking stalls. With some amenities, lots of bikes. We're putting bike storage above every single car parking stall, trying to promote people using bikes in this area, we think is big, as well as some, handicap accessible type bike stalls and racks, bicycle repair station, dog wash, all in the lower level. When we get up to the main level, again on the back side of the building, we have a second level of of enclosed parking. It's actually now at grade, but it's enclosed. So again, another 25 stalls there. And then on the front side of the building that comes out and projects out to University Avenue, we have a small retail space. Still working through the final numbers, but right now we're at just over 2,300 square feet for that retail space. Our common entry for the apartments, a small leasing office, mail area, an elevator, as then we go up to the residence, which is 3 stories of residential housing above. The mix here again, as is in your packet, we have a support letter from the Workforce Housing Task Force. Anthony is committed to doing 20% of the project as workforce housing, which we think Middleton as a whole and this area specifically really needs. There really isn't any of that in this specific location. We're right on a main thoroughfare and bus line and et cetera. So it's a mixture of a couple of 2-bedrooms, but we really are focusing on studio and 1-bedrooms, again, trying to bring workforce housing to this area. So good size units for 1 and studios, but again, not 2s and 3s. We're trying to really commit to the workforce kind of scenario of people we're trying to attract, people living and working in this area. So the upper floors, 2 through 4, are really the same type of floor plan. When we get to, this just kind of shows the overall construction of the building. And again, it's a 4-story building. Because of the parking and whatnot, we're using 2 levels of concrete deck and then wood framed above. So now again, we just kind of get through some of the images of what the building would look like, what we're proposing. Again, right now we're just asking for the rezoning, but trying to be a little bit ahead of the curve for hopeful upcoming SIPs, kind of showing you what we're anticipating and looking at. So again, if you're coming down University Avenue from the Park Street area, here's kind of the view you would see. Again, here's an image that we looked at previously. So the style of the building is kind of, it's a more modern building, not using pitched roofs to try to keep the height of the building down. But what we did try to do, and this is pretty accurate, at least as most we can make it in the computer, is if you notice, and if you were to drive by or look in your packet at what the current cottage looks like, it's an all-stone veneer or face on the building with lots of dark reddish burgundy accents, which you can see here in this rendering. So what we did is really try to take that architectural element, and even though we've got an older, as we call it, the cottage building with pitched roofs, try to take some of those architectural elements and add them into this more modern building behind it. So the red, fiber cement or composite lap siding, the white windows, the red window trims, the accent colors, etc. The brick and the masonry, same color tones and palettes that are on the existing house. So trying to, again, tie these 2 buildings, although justly different in architectural styles and ages, we think they actually really complement each other for, kind of a past look and a future look at what this street will eventually look like. So again, as we just kind of work through it, things I know that are in the packet that as we get to SIP level, signage, lighting, those types of things, those will be subsequent details to come, and will definitely fit within and be in front of you for approvals as those things come up. So again, here's a look as if you're coming from Madison on University towards Park Street of what that might look like. And then we get into shadow studies. We've put a couple different times of the year and falls and summers and solstice and equinox in your packet. And so one of the concerns we've heard, of course, and we're always trying to be conscious of is, what does this do? I mean, let's be honest, everybody, and I'm sure we'll hear some people tonight, change is scary. Everybody doesn't want change, but change is inevitable and change is coming. But how do we make change that doesn't dramatically alter the fabric of the neighborhood? So we did, in the computer modeling, we were able to do an existing kind of condition. We went out and tried to actually locate the trees and put them in the model about the size and shape and height that they are in real life. I think there's probably even more out there. We didn't focus on ones that were too small. And showed the existing conditions and how the shadows of both the buildings and the mature trees cast shadows, and then pose that to what would happen once the new building is built. And we feel that as you look at it, because the sun, as it goes through these different conditions, doesn't have real dramatic effect. There are a couple times of the year and a couple conditions that I think really the house that's most affected, or the property really is the insurance agent to the right at certain times of the year, has a little more shadow than it would in the existing condition. But because of the nature of the trees and some of the other things out there, and the depth of the street, I think is another of that block. It's an unusually deep block. I'm sure it's more normal for for Middleton, but in comparison to more modern blocks, this is a very deep block. So as you kind of look at through the shadow studies, summer, winter, I think in your packet that Mark had sent out, there was another one where we did equinox for both. You'll see that our shadows aren't even reaching halfway back into the neighborhood. They really kind of stay along that edge. And again, in comparison to the existing tree lines the shadow we don't feel really impacts the properties negatively from what they currently have in that condition. The rest of it kind of gets into, I just put it in the packet, is general stuff, civil engineering plans and et cetera. So again, I'll finish up and then I'll turn it over to Anthony here to kind of talk about the economics of the project. But we really feel, again, that this project is really the perfect project for this location. The city, and as Mark had outlined in his report, they've done comprehensive plans in 2006. They did a analysis, although I don't know it was adopted in 2009 for this area. In that 2009, for example, we're in zone 3. And it talks about a number of things that this area, I mean, basically the city had these two things done, in my opinion, because they recognize that this area of the city needs to be redeveloped. It will be redeveloped. It's your artery, it's your corridor. Where do people want to redevelop? They want to on that line, right? And these reports don't say redevelop on only one side. They don't say just develop on the Willie Street side. It's the University Avenue corridor. And in for the 2009, it's from Park Street down to, I think, Allen Boulevard. And they reference our zone that we're in 3 as neighborhood and community mixed-use commercial core, which is exactly what we're proposing. We're proposing a mixed-use commercial building. It talks about things like shared parking lots where possible, limiting parking may be shared between sites. We're doing that. It talks about apartments over commercial space. You know, we're doing those things. You know, expanding housing opportunity, mixing and infilling housing in urban areas, all these things, which is exactly the type of project we're bringing forward in, again, what I think is the right area. Consolidating surface parking lots and access points, we're doing that. Encouraging enclosed and underground parking, encouraging rear and side yard parking access. All these things, again, we've really worked through in our design to make sure we've incorporated what the city really is looking for long term. You know, kind of in that, I guess I would just say, yeah, this is a PDD. The movement, as we all know, is to bring buildings forward to the street, to density. I mean, you know, we all know it. Land is not getting cheaper, it's getting more expensive. There's a reason. We need to densify our urban housing. We don't want urban sprawl. We've obviously made that decision over the last number of years. So buildings are gonna get bigger, they're gonna get taller. And as architects and as planners, we look at it and say, you know, you design for the future, you don't design for the past, right? Yeah, there's 2-story houses and 2-story businesses around, because that's what, when the last time this street was developed, that's what there was. But the future is gonna go more dense. It's not going to go less dense. It's not going to shrink. And you develop for what you guys have put forth in your studies, you know, which is a denser, taller city. You don't design for the past. And that's, as architects, what we're taught and what we feel is appropriate. And I would just address, I think, some of these other things. Again, we're just here for rezoning. And the last thing I'll just say, I know that some of the specific concerns that the staff report had, at this point, I think some of those things, in my opinion, we're working through details, you know, 39 units versus 38, et cetera, and I think we can work through how that process works. The other things, some of the parking and stuff, I know I've already talked to Mark that we're working on addressing those and getting stalls at work and designing a turnaround area and et cetera. So I think those things come in the SIP level. I don't see anything that's here. We obviously have the traffic study that's out there that's being commissioned and I think was just approved this week, so it's gonna start. So on some of those things, we can't really talk until we get that back. We did have productive meetings with the city, engineers and staff and the fire department about access, and we're waiting for the traffic study to come in to say what and how we can make those things work. So we're kind of paused on that. And again, I think a lot of that stuff is at SIP level. So again, I'll turn it over to Anthony to finish up ours real quick about the economics. But again, I just want to say I think this is a great project, and I hope you consider that.
Thank you, Mark. My name is Anthony Gray. I'm the president and CEO of the Institute for Global Ethics. It's the nation's oldest ethics think tank that we have moved into what we're calling the Cottage, what used to be the little daycare center right across the street from the Willie Street Co-op. I rise this evening not just to ask you to approve this PDD application, but to ask you to approve it tonight. We have a circumstance where the extended delay of the process, for larger developers, it's not much of an imposition, but I run a nonprofit. 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks could be the difference between our being successful on this project and our not. And I'll give you just one example. WIDA, the state's housing organization, is quite excited about this project and has gone out of their way to be helpful, understanding that folks like myself can't carry projects indefinitely while we go through the machinations, WIDA has found a way to streamline this process for me. So while the politicians from WIDA have been out to visit the site, I don't know, maybe a dozen times, on Monday, we're literally having the underwriter come out. And then we're going to sit down, the application's done, the underwriter's going to come out for a site visit, and we are going to go spend the next 3 weeks going through the most expeditious commercial underwriting you've ever seen in your life. They understand the difficulty that delay brings small developers like myself. And the underwriter, believe it or not, is leaving for Nepal in April. So we literally only have 3 weeks to get that process done. So I would ask your approval for this development. We have gone out of our way to try and find ways to integrate the built environment to enhance the community, to bring places where people in Middleton want to live, work, and play. And we're pretty pleased with where we are. But even if we have some differences about design, they'll be addressed in the SIP process. I'll be back before you. For instance, on the commercial, right in that corner facing the parking lot, we're thinking about putting perhaps a revolving door or a dual entrance so it makes it more welcoming from the street in addition to from the lot. There's still design elements that are being integrated. All we're asking for here in the PDD GIP process is an approval of the rezoning so we can keep the process moving forward. If this is a plan and a project that you like and support, even if there may be small places where you think we can improve it, and we're eager to hear those, I would ask you to vote for this tonight. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Mayor and the
Okay, thank you.
Planning Council.
So the next speaker is Greg Neeson. He like to speak in opposition.
Other position.
Could you please come over here?
Well, it is. Approval of the rezoning is specific to the site plan, which would include the building setback.
You can use that or else whichever you want.
Okay, my name is Greg Neeson, and I own the building at 6810 University Avenue, which is the building just east of these lots. And my concern was just the setback, I guess, of the building, because I feel that if the building is only 10 feet from the property line, it will pretty much block our building coming from the west, unless you're pretty much right in front of it. So that was a bit of a concern, because when we built our building, I believe the setback was 30 feet from the front and 20 feet from the back and 10 for each side, if I'm not mistaken. And the city was pretty strict about it at that time, including being pretty strict about green space. The other concern that I had, I guess, would have something to do with the traffic flow. Right now, we're seeing a considerable number of U-turns already without that structure there. And so you probably will have to address that, because I'm sure with 38 units plus retail, anybody coming from the west is gonna have to make a U-turn to get around. Or if they're leaving the building, they're gonna exit on University Avenue, go down Park Street, right on Park Street, right on Franklin, right on Branch Street by the Sauk Trail schools. And so there'll be considerably more traffic, I guess, on that particular area. So I'm not opposed to a new building, maybe just the size of the building. I think a new structure would be good for the area. But I think this particular building, as big as it is, could possibly reduce the value of my property. I'm not sure for sure. I'd have to check on that, but that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Ask
Greg.
you, your building is zone B1, right?
Office.
Yes. Do you know the depth of your parcel? How deep it is?
I think it's the same depth as the parcel right next to ours, approximately the same depth.
Right. The 6824 is deeper, but this one, these other other
Yeah,
three
the
are
one
not.
that's 68,
Or 2.5 times as deep. I think it's 16 and 18 are roughly the depth of Mr. Nelson's.
Right.
I'm sorry, 60 feet?
I think it's this, ours is the same depth, I think, as the first
Okay, and that's 60 feet?
one. I really can't say for sure.
You know, Mark?
She's checking.
Okay.
Doesn't seem to be working. I was trying to get on. Not responding.
146 feet.
For the 28, 24?
Yeah, for both, yeah, 146.
And our building is set back to
30.
20 feet from the property line.
20 feet.
So
from the
we're,
property.
we're back quite a distance. We're,
What is it?
we didn't really have any choice to put the building there because of the parking, and our width is only 50 feet wide, I think. So,
And your parking is mostly for your
it's all for our office. yes.
employees
Yeah,
and clients?
employees, yeah.
And I think I've made a U-turn or two there.
Well, that's all right. All right. Okay, well, thank you.
Any,
When people want to turn, oh, sorry, one more. When people want to turn left into your property, there's not a divider or median that stops them, right?
Not right there, no.
Okay.
No. So about half of them turn around in our parking lot, the other half just zip a U-turn.
It's frozen.
anybody has any other questions for Greg? Okay, go ahead.
My name is Buzz Menz, and I have the,
Oh, well,
Not a question for you, Greg. I don't think.
Oh.
It's a question.
oh, I'm sorry.
it's from the plan commission, please, so I apologize.
But
so.
you, I mean, the hearing's still open, right, so.
Yeah, so but you can speak. Anybody else wants to speak? Yeah, if you want to speak, you can speak, so, go ahead.
Just real quick, the depth of the lot that we were just talking about is 150 feet.
Okay, go ahead and identify
Okay.
yourself.
My name is Buzz Menz, and I own the lot immediately to the west, 6904 University, which
Yep.
is a little bit deeper even than his lot.
Mhm.
It abuts me, okay? I basically support this plan. I think I like the concept of the mixed use, and I definitely like the concept that that corridor will be developed eventually. Back when I bought my property in 1986, there was already plans to take the building that I own, convert it to a 3-story multi-use, which is B1 zoning, commercial on the first floor and 2 floors of residential, which would be like apartments, okay? And, you know, I've looked at this. I think that generally, from looking at the shadow studies and the setbacks and everything, eventually, when you look at everything going on in the corridor, you're going to see more and more of that anyway. And it's how this city can expand. I look currently what's going on downtown, and I say this is a slam dunk because of you're even taller downtown. You have no setbacks, and but it's great. I mean, I was downtown just 2 days ago, and the place is thriving. Tons of people are there. It's a great thing. So anyway, I have full support for Anthony in this project, and I think that what's going on is good. I do agree with Mr. Neeson in terms of the traffic. We need to have that study and see how that affects that. That's probably the main thing that is really here that might have to be tweaked one way or another to address that. And as far as the U-turns, yeah, we all do U-turns there. But, you know, part of that is that just the way the street is configured and everything else. If you put a no U-turn sign in there, people will just drive through the neighborhoods and to get around the corner, you know? So, which I've done too, you know? So, in closing, I just wanted to say I as the next door neighbor, I do support what's going on there, and I sort of like what's going on there. And I think it's looking forward, which is, I think, what Middleton wants to be doing anyway.
So you share the parking lot from what I can see and the driveway?
Yeah, I think that's the plan, you know. Anthony assures me that his tenants won't be parking in my commercial people's places, so, you know, I'm all good with that, you know.
Okay, okay.
So, thank you. Any questions?
I think the police chief just came in through the door, though, so anybody else who wants to admit to.
Okay, so the next one who likes to speak is Yuli Shi. And that's to speak in opposition.
Hi, my name's Yuli Shi. We own the property directly behind this property. We were never notified of this development, and so this is the first time we have heard of it. You're right. But that's it. We've not had any information that this property or development was going on.
Which property specifically, can you?
We're 6825 Franklin Avenue. We're directly behind the cottage, the
Oh,
little
okay.
cottage. We own the little house.
Near the house, the R1.
Yeah,
okay,
this one
yeah.
right here.
Right, right. Our concern, aside from the traffic pattern, it's already pretty busy there. I personally have never done a U-turn there. I think that Willie Street Co-op brings a lot of traffic there. I think Willie Street Co-op is a wonderful commercial business there. This building here, I think the way it's designed, that what I've seen tonight, it compromises the charm and integrity of Middleton as a quaint city. And the reason that I love living here is because of the beauty. And with this large building, I'm concerned about the runoff and how that would affect our property and the properties in Middleton. Will the runoff affect any of the adjacent properties, and how that will be addressed? With this large building, a lot of the trees and, you know, the little terraces will be gone. I think that's part of the city charm, and I believe the city has done a great job in downtown Middleton trying to preserve the trees and the environmental aspects of the land. And I think this large building detracts or takes away from that. So I do oppose that.
Yes, go ahead.
Yuli, I have a question. Our records show that we mailed the notice to you at 6917 Maywood Avenue.
I also own that house. That's another house I own. I live at 2130 Wood Road.
But is the billing information for this house Maywood Avenue?
No, I just looked
Oh,
at
you
this
looked it
Wood
up.
Road.
I live at Wood Road, and I received that notice there. That is my,
She received the notice at Wood Road.
right.
Oh, I thought you said she didn't receive it. I'm sorry.
I did receive it, but
Okay.
I didn't receive any other information other than what was sent to me by the city. Thank you very much, otherwise I wouldn't know what's going on. My other concern is having that was discussed tonight, is the access through the back. I would oppose having a drive-through or a driveway going through the back of my yard or our yard, but I think that's a personal nature and maybe the way the city sees it. I don't know how you feel about that, but I would not like to have an access road going through my backyard. But I think that may be selfish, I don't know.
Well, it can't.
I don't think it's actually proposed.
I don't think it's proposed to.
If you wanna, I can show you here. This would be your property line, and there's a road that would come this way. Driveway. So there is the potential of headlights at night shining into that property.
Oh, that's lovely.
That can be, but there would, we would as a condition put a berm or plantings there to stop the lights. Screening.
And this would start descending here anyway, so.
And is that type of screening the same kind of screening that you tried in behind Willie Street Co-op with those arborvitaes that never live?
I don't know what we would, we're not that specific.
That's a much smaller space.
Well, the thing with if you put a berm and some trees, you know, there's some lighting issues, and with your time study, you have to make sure that some of those trees would be big enough to absorb any light, you know, that takes some further study, I would think. But anyway, those are my concerns, but I do oppose it, and I appreciate the time to speak tonight.
Thank you, Yuli. Any questions for Yuli? Anybody else?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Kathy.
Is that a rental property now?
Yes, I do rent it out.
And how many units are in it?
It's a single family home.
Oh, so it's one?
Yes, and the tenant's little girl had gone to that little daycare right behind the house. So that was nice. The little daycare was very cute.
So do you also own that yellow house, which is on the
Pardon?
Coolidge Court?
No, I don't own the
Okay,
yellow house in the Coolidge. I own another house on Maywood.
Okay. Okay, so the next speaker is Brian. Brian?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yuli.
Yes, listening.
Speaking in opposition.
Name's Brian Brame, Yuli's significant other. Again, I own the property jointly, 6825 Franklin Avenue. I guess my biggest issue with this, if this notice of public hearing that the city sent out to us, that I think I received sometime the end of February, is the only notice that went out regarding this. I mean, we had no idea what was going on here until we sat down here tonight and watched this proposal. We had no way of preparing for this, trying to come up with some, reasonable discussion points other than just sitting here right now trying to scribble some stuff down on the paper. Was there anything else regarding this development that would have been sent to the immediate property owners? Because I don't see some of our.
I think it's important to know that, in answer to your question, a consultant that I paid for mailed a notice to you. We are now the second or third time we've come in front of the Planning Commission. We've also appeared before the Workforce Housing Commission, all of which have been noticed.
Noticed directly to the
No.
property owners or in the newspaper or
Well,
something?
there was some neighborhood meeting. I don't know who was notified. Mark, did city send any other notification? Or?
We sent out a, as Anthony, Mr. Gray just mentioned, they sent out a mailing at their cost using our list in January, I would think it was. The hearing itself for tonight's hearing, that was paid for by and distributed by the city, and we have those addresses that it went to. In terms of regular committee meetings, like the Workforce Housing Committee, that doesn't get noticed to individual people, but we have a service where people can sign up, notify me to get notices of mailings. The hearing notice that we sent out for this meeting does state that there would be a 4-story mixed-use apartment building consisting of 38 dwelling units, 57 parking stalls, and first-floor retail space. And it welcomes, right, and we welcome people to, there's information available at City Hall. So I don't know, we can't physically send out an entire set of plans to,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
so.
I just would like to have known about what was going on before this. I know Buzz, he owns the property that's probably the most affected by this, other than possibly the insurance building. But apparently he's working in conjunction with this easement, and maybe there's his property's commercial to begin with. Ours is residential. Until I saw this, I didn't realize there was going to be a driveway that doesn't go through our backyard, but it comes into our backyard as far as depth goes. Like I say, I don't even know if our neighbors immediately behind that driveway know that this is going on.
So Mark, all those people were informed, right?
I imagine they were sent just like we were. Unfortunately, I don't see them here, but.
Thank you, Brian. Anything else you want to say, or?
No, my concern, I guess, other than the fact that I didn't know about this, was just the height of the building. I don't have a problem with the development of those lots. Just the height of the building, I guess.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So next is Sharon Brummel. She is registering an opposition without speaking. Anybody else wants to speak on this particular topic? Yes, Van?
Yeah, Van Nutt, Middleton Chamber of Commerce. I'm just going to repeat some of what you've heard. It's a good-looking project. And, you know, there's a lot of detail that still has to be resolved. Greg's absolutely right. He's got the building to the east of it. It's set back, and he's gonna lose some visibility. There's no doubt about that. But as you look at this project, know that this project is gonna happen 20 more times, or some version of this, on University Avenue, quite possibly in our lifetimes. I hope my lifetime, I hope yours as well. But, you know, for me to have peace with this type of development, I went to Willie Street, I went to Atwood, I went to some east side neighborhoods that have been predominantly, you know, old single-family housing converted into flats, and looking at the impact and how some of these structures are able to fit into that neighborhood, whether it's setbacks on top floors, which I think Anthony showed on his drawing here, setback from the street a little bit more, some breakage of the building to help it work. But this is but the first of many in this corridor, and it is going to happen. I just hope that, you know, you work with them, that it gets done right, because it'll help set tone for the rest of the development in the on the corridor. So more to come. Good looking project, and Buzz, you must have got T-boned doing one of those U-turns. Anyhow, that's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you, Van. I can see Kurt agrees with you. So anybody else who wants to speak, go ahead.
Actually, I had registered not to speak, but I.
Okay, go ahead. Identify yourself and speak.
I'm Sharon Brummel, and I live at 6222 Lakeview Boulevard. Not immediately close to this area, but we do own rental properties in the area. And my question is about, have you checked the rental market for studios and one-bedrooms? Because, you know, there've been signs up at Middleton Commons on University Avenue. I don't have anything to do with that property, but it's a 42-unit with studios and one-bedrooms renting for under $800 a month, and they've got an apartment available now. So, you know, I'm concerned sometimes about the ebb and flow of the availability of rental, and how will this impact, of course, all of the developments happening in Middleton, you know?
Thank you.
Okay.
In answer to her question of...
Can you use the microphone just for the recorder?
Maybe not get it.
In answer to my neighbor's question of course we checked, we did our own research initially while we were looking at the feasibility of the project, but one of the requirements for our WIDA application, so that we're going to bring in state money into Middleton, was that we have Baker Tilly, which is a fairly well-respected consultative firm, put together a formal, I think it's 40-page market study to make sure that before we made this kind of investment in the city, that the demand was there, right? We want to make sure that we're going into a market that needs. Otherwise, it would make no financial sense for us, and we wouldn't do it.
Of course.
Okay, well, thank you.
What are the projected rents?
Okay, I would say maybe both of you could discuss it after the meeting, perhaps. Would that be the best?
I was gonna ask that question later during the discussion.
Yeah, you have a
too.
question, go ahead and ask, Kurt. If you have a question.
Well, no, I mean, this was an issue we were wrestling with at Workforce Housing Committee that we didn't, because you didn't have your, boy, this is really echoey. I think it's that way.
No, it's not.
At the time, we didn't have a detailed pro forma, so what were the rents? Because your ones are ranging from like 725 to 850 square feet, right?
Yeah, 1,100, 1,300, and 1,800. And that's
For the market.
studio,
Yeah.
1 bedroom, and 3 2-bedrooms. There's 6 studios, 31 bedrooms, and actually at the request of the Workforce Housing Committee, we added a 3rd 2-bedroom, but we managed to do it by reconfiguring space. For the record, we didn't change any of the square footage of the building. We didn't change the outside of the building. We just found the highest best use for the space that already existed within it. And that was an explicit request from the Workforce Housing Committee, who was kind enough to provide us with a letter of support for the project.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else has any questions, or anybody else wants to speak? Okay, I'm going to close this part of the public hearing, and it's way past 7:10, and I'm going to open request for conditional use permit for Middleton Gymnastics Academy LLC, 83304 Cynthia Street.
And I think maybe Kim Christensen,
Kimmy is here.
the owner, is here.
Is
To
Kim,
answer questions if you need anything.
if you want to say
But I
something,
can
go
mention
ahead.
too, I can talk about it too.
Go ahead.
If you'd rather.
Yeah, okay, go ahead and you can.
You don't have to pull it out. in the
Okay,
Go ahead,
room.
Ken.
I can just talk into it, okay.
Do you want to present anything, or do you want me just to talk about
No,
it?
you can just ask me questions about it, so.
Sure. Well, the staff recommendation is approval, subject to any engineering or plan commission comments about the building itself. The Middleton Gymnastics has operated about 2 doors down from this site for the past 5 years, and now would like to build a building on that site. So the staff recommendation is approval for the conditional use and design review, subject to resolution of any outstanding.
Access is off for Scythia, not airport, right?
Correct.
Anybody has any commissioners? Okay, anything else you want to add, Kim?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Unless you've got questions.
Anybody else who wants to speak on this topic? Okay, I'm going to close this part of the hearing, and it's way past 7:30 as well. So now I'm going to open the request for conditional use permit for Lycon Incorporated for 8125 University Avenue.
And as they make their way up, Mayor, I will report to you that the Zoning Board of Appeals tonight met previously to this meeting, and they approved 2 variances related to this project. And now I'm misplacing my notes, but I guess I have it memorized. Oh, here it is. They approved the height variance for the B3 zoning district, so the western portion of the lot is zoned B3, and they granted a variance for the height. And then also, the second variance they granted was for the side setback of 5 feet in the industrial zoning district. And also, as part of their motion of approving those 2 variances, they advised the Plan Commission to require enhanced design of the aggregate storage building. So
Okay.
that's their recommendation to the Plan Commission.
Thank you, Mark.
And by design, do they mean like the
Facade.
the facade and the
Right,
exterior? Okay.
right.
Thank you.
Okay, please identify yourself.
My name is G.R. Lyons. I'm president of Lycon Incorporated. We're obviously located on University Avenue. We've been doing business in Middleton for a great many years. And we appreciate staff's help with trying to address concerns. And some of, as you all know, I've addressed these issues a little bit, and I'll try to make it as brief as possible and just answer questions. But I wanted to make sure that we've clearly portrayed that this does not expand the hours of operation of our business. It does not expand the volume of concrete produced at this site. What it does do is reduce the number of trucks that are going to be on the road to produce that amount of concrete. So each train car that comes will represent 5 dump trucks, 115 tons of aggregate. So on an average day, our days vary a great deal in volume from today to October. I mean, the construction season is very varied. But when there's work in this marketplace, this plant will get busier. This plant has not been as busy the last 5 years as it probably will become when we see University Avenue corridor develop and we see that kind of stuff. We're trying to get in front of it from a trucking standpoint. It's more efficient for us, a more efficient business model. We also, in the winter months, when we heat the aggregate, the system we'll use here is way more modern than what we're doing. Very much more efficient, burns a lot less fuel, so our carbon footprint gets greatly reduced by using the train. What we're trying to do here with this project is just to utilize the rail corridor that's there in conjunction with the railroad. We have their support, they're here with us as well, and we want to reduce the number of dump trucks. So if a typical day, we're going to, at least 50% of the dump trucks will be eliminated on a typical day when the trains are running. It could be as high as 70%, depending on the mix of the mixes that we use. The reason this is not expanding our business is that Ready Mix plant does not care if it gets its aggregates by dump truck or by train. It just doesn't matter. It's going to produce what it produces. We just have to get the material to it. We'll just keep trucking it if we get busier. So this is going to, if each train car is 5 loads, that's 10 trips eliminated. There'll be 10 train cars every train. The train's already coming out through Middleton 1 to 2 times a day, depending on the day of the week. It's not adding any service there. That service already exists. So we've already offered to, we intend on cleaning up the rest of the buildings, painting, and incorporating the trim and accents to tie all the buildings together. We've addressed the art, and we're willing to work with that. We'd like, to have approval so that the kind of art is not offensive to us, at least. I mean, we don't want some approval on our building, but yeah, we're open-minded to that stuff, and we've always tried to be a good corporate citizen, and I think the fact that it's going to eliminate truck traffic is going to reduce the noise, and it's going to reduce the hours of operation for the dump trucks, because the train will be there, come there, we'll unload that, and then we'll work the rest of the day with that aggregate that's already there. If we're working with dump trucks, we'll have dump trucks going as long as we have ready-mix trucks going. They'll just keep coming. So it is a great benefit to the Demingway and Terrace neighborhood to reduce that amount of truck traffic.
I do have a question, just because I don't understand the operation as well. The aggregate storage is because each train load is going to have a lot more aggregate than one truck. And so you need to, if you didn't have an aggregate storage facility, you couldn't bring in the train, or you'd bring in the train and the stuff would be stored just in a pile?
Right, correct. Yeah, it could be stored in a pile. But then you would be taking an end loader and moving it into a dump truck, and taking the dump truck and putting it into the plant. And that kind of defeats the purpose of trying to reduce your carbon footprint.
Because the aggregate storage facility has a conveyor system.
It has a conveyor system, which is a good point. I didn't mention that the conveyor system is totally enclosed. The conveyors are covered, the building is covered, all the aggregate is inside. Everything is, from the time that train hits the yard, and once we open the doors of the train car, that material never will see the outdoors again. It's going to be enclosed until it's in a ready-mix truck going out.
The reason I ask that is, if we were to deny the conditional use, because there's some people who said we should deny the conditional use, you could still conceivably bring in loads of aggregate on the train.
Certainly.
And dump a pile, and we'd be looking at a pile rather than a
correct
clean modern building.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And that would be permitted under our zoning code? Outdoor storage of materials as a accessory use, or?
The question is, would that expand the conditional use? I guess I would ask Eileen how she
It's
currently
a conditional use.
It's been done since that plant was on that property. That practice has existed since the 50s.
And the plant proceeds in annexation into the city.
Yes.
The only difference would be that the trucks right now kind of deliver just in time.
Correct.
Whereas this would be one big, 10 rail cars worth, and each rail car is about 4 or 5 trucks.
5 trucks, yeah.
Yeah. So that would be,
Each rail car is 10 trips in and out the driveway, 10 trips through the intersection, 10 trips down University Avenue or the Beltline or Highway 14.
so I guess I don't know, Eileen, how you would feel if that would be changing the use of the property in terms of more intense. It's hard to.
I don't think it would, no,
yeah.
I think it's still the same use.
It's been.
We don't have a
But
condition on the
intensity,
intensity. We
right,
don't have a
exactly.
condition on it.
That's
So
been done
I
for
agree
years
with
and
that.
years and
Yeah.
years. The aggregate's put on the ground. It's being done, it's on the ground.
No, I agree with that too.
It's currently being done.
So I was just there about maybe 1 hour ago. So you have that building where the trucks come. So the trucks unload into that building there, and that's where the conveyor belt is, and you want that to be bigger, right? Is that
Correct.
what-
And well, what we're doing is we're making an unloading facility for train cars into a building that is larger, yes, so that all the material in the train cars is stored inside. And that we have enough material for a couple days, because if one train comes and it's raining and we're not busy, we can still unload that train within 2 days and send it back. Our projection is, probably 3 days a week is the average service, and when it's in a busy time, it might be 5 days a week. The railroad's currently going out that direction. On at least 2 days of the week, they're going out twice, and every day of the week, they're going out once, my understanding. So it's not an expansion of what they're doing.
Okay.
It's not gonna be an expansion of what we're currently doing with the ready-mix trucks. We're only gonna do the same volume that ready-mix plant is capable of doing, which is only gonna be achieved if the market here really expands. You know, we're not, you know. It varies. It's so hard to tell you year to year, month to month, what the truck count will be, because the plant can be 40% less one year versus the other, depending on how many buildings are being built here, right?
Okay.
But it is every train car is 5 trucks. Every train load, it comes 10 cars, 50 trucks.
Any other?
Can I just ask a
go
technical
ahead,
question? Is there currently a conditional use permit on the property? Or, since it pre-exists the city zoning, it's a lawful non-conforming use?
Well, the part where it's industrial, that's conforming.
Conforming.
But the part of the B3, I believe they've gotten conditional use permits in the past when they were expanded.
Okay.
I didn't review it like Mark did, but.
Yeah, okay.
If you look at page, page 10 of the staff report, the second bullet, second bullet point, there was a conditional use approval in November of 2004 for the area circled in red.
And that's because that's in the B3, not the industrial zone.
No, that's in the industrial.
That's in the industrial.
Yeah.
But that had to do with the height of the structure, so.
Yeah.
Right.
All right.
Okay, you guys want to speak as well, or? Go ahead.
This is Tom McCoy Engineering, the engineer, just to answer questions.
Okay. How about you, sir?
Jason Murphy with Watco Companies, the owner of Wisconsin and Southern Railroad. Just like to say this, for those of you that don't know, our railroad, the track itself, the infrastructure, the permanent infrastructure is owned by the state of Wisconsin. We are the operator of the state's asset. We're in partnership with the state on that. This is exactly the type of thing that the state had in mind when they purchased the rail infrastructure, which is taking trucks off the road, is what this accomplishes. When you think about 10 rail cars a day, 3 times a week, we're taking a significant amount of traffic out of that area. Deming Way, I know, is already very congested. I've tried to get in and out of this facility in the afternoon. It's very challenging. So I would also add that we serve Lycon numerous locations throughout Wisconsin. You will not find a cleaner industrial facility than what they operate. It's fantastic the way that they do business. And also, we serve them in Oregon. That's a fairly new facility, which was approved a few years back. We have one right in Madison. These are facilities that are clean, they're run the right way, and we're in full support of this project. So if there's any questions from a railroad perspective, I'd be happy to answer those.
Does anybody has any questions from? Okay, so, well, Susan West and then Bill White.
Okay, I've been following this for a while. Susan West, 3542 John Muir Drive, and I'm City Council President. I've got a question in terms of you're going to be taking aggregate, rough concrete, dusty off of the trains. I know you also are taking it off of the trucks. How much dust is being generated and how well is it being contained? Will it be an improvement or less than what's currently happening?
The entire system is a closed system. When the train comes and empties out into the hopper, that material, so that material is typically 3.5% to 5% moisture content, so it's actually wet, not dry and dusty. And it goes into a hopper underground and comes out a covered conveyor, goes into a building that's enclosed and covered, comes out on a covered conveyor, goes into the plant on a covered conveyor, so the wind can't even get at it and blow it around. So for dust mitigation, we actually sweep that property every week with a vacuum truck and make sure that we keep anything that we track into the facility from work sites out and around the community, keep that clean so we don't have dust. We're very conscious of that. So this will decrease the amount of noise in operation because it'll reduce the amount of truck traffic, and it will
it's fully encapsulating the aggregate, so the aggregate will not have the ability to blow around and be dusty.
Just to brief, Council President West, we talked about at the last public hearing that since it's a conditional use permit process, we can attach various sorts of performance conditions to the property, such as shall emit no more dust, noise, vibration than that commonly associated. Or we can even have specific measurement standards if we feel like, just for the future, if the city has any performance issues, if ownership changes or whatever.
Okay, next speaker is Bill White.
Which one is alive?
That one's working.
The one that's in the
Here?
folder.
This
yeah.
one? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. My name is Bill White. I am wearing the hat of a consultant. I am in partnership with a guy named Al Fish that used to be Vice Chancellor for facilities at the university, and we call ourselves White Fish Partners. Okay, enough of that. I'm here because I was asked to kind of review this application to give Lycon a kind of a second opinion as to whether it was on the right track or not on the right track. And in my opinion, it is on the right track. And by way of background, in 1990, I established a group called the Dane County Association of Aggregate Producers. And that group was formed for a couple of reasons, one of which was there was a hodgepodge of local regulations that were coming that we needed to be standardized, but also we wanted to create best practices among the producers of aggregate materials. I think that this, maybe you don't really appreciate it, but to have this particular facility so close to the end user is a real plus for Middleton. I live in a small municipality that also begins with M to the east of here. And I just want to say that they're a little jealous of the kind of growth and planning and implementation that Middleton has been able to do. And I think part of it has been a collaborative organization such as Lycon working with Middleton to come forward, moving ahead. The basic format here is to take trucks off the road and put them in rail cars that for a rail line that's already in place, already busy, already active. There's, as JR has indicated, there is a lot of pluses, including less noise, less truck traffic, less wear and tear on your roads, greater safety. He did not really go in too much to how the gravel is taken from the bottom of the cars. It's not dumped back and forth. In response to the questions about the dust, this gravel is actually mined elsewhere and washed elsewhere. And so it comes into this particular facility already clean, and it's going to be even less noisy and less dusty going forward on that. We also will reduce our energy use. There'll be less noise and less dust going forward. We have no objection to the staff recommendations in terms of prettying the place up, but we'd kind of like to have like a little input into what is actually going to go on the mural. But the whole notion of making this a very attractive facility is completely in line with the corporate intent here. I would also say that long-term, if the city has a plan for redevelopment of this parcel, we'd be glad to work with you and look forward to something that we could look at to see whether it makes a lot of sense to go ahead. But bottom line is you're very lucky to have this, and I think that this proposal is a good one.
Thank you, Bill. Anybody else any questions? Kurt, anybody else?
Can I take exception to
Yes.
prettying the place up and talk about enhancement of the building? Possibly through public art.
Yeah, well, that was one of the recommendations that I was hoping that, to address. There were 3 recommendations at the end of the staff report, one of which was the creation or the use of a mural and a public art display, and we're on board with that.
Anybody else? Anybody else who wants to speak? Yes.
No, I was just going to say, should we look at it piece by piece, or should we look at it in aggregate.
You know, I met
This
with
is
the
a
staff
concrete-
yesterday. There were
this is a
so many
concrete
puns that
example
came
of
out.
the.
Is it abstract art or concrete?
Yeah, it's a concrete example.
Yeah,
okay,
it was a
okay.
concrete example.
Okay, I knew you'd appreciate that. So,
I didn't know that was in your stuff.
Anybody else who wants to speak on this topic? Okay, I'm going to close this part of the hearing, and we are going to go to item number 2, which is a request for Z rezoning from Office District B1 to Plan Development District, General Implementation Plan for Ostringer Mixed-Use Development. Who wants to start?
Mark, did you wanna say?
Mark, you want to
wanna
say
talk about
anything?
the 39 versus 38?
So on page 14 of my staff report, I listed various concerns that we had at the staff level that I did the primary review. As I think I might have mentioned it earlier, there's an issue regarding the number of units. In some places in the application, there was a reference to 38 dwelling units, and that's what I based the hearing notice on. But then in other locations, including the plan set, it shows 39 units. So that's an issue. If there's a desire to have 39 units, in my view, that's an more intense use. So that would require another hearing. Eileen, I think, agrees with that, or?
Yeah, I think the 38 was what was noticed, because that was what was applied.
That was what it was applied for, was in the application, right? If it were less than 38, then we wouldn't see a need for another hearing. In other words, the number has to be 38 or less, not to have another hearing. We also had a concern, I think all three of us on planning had a concern about the commercial space. The build plan talks specifically about commercial space for commercial uses that should be neighborhood-oriented uses. We felt, and talking about this at some length, we felt that it would be best to focus on the B1 permitted uses, the office uses, because retail generally would generate a heavier parking demand, and as has been noted by several speakers, there was a concern about access to the site. And B1 is what the current zoning is, so that was another recommendation or another concern we had, and that would be one way to address that. Building height and setbacks, the build plan in numerous locations talks about limiting the heights of buildings to 3 stories. Now, obviously, plans can change, times change, proposals change, so that doesn't mean we'd be necessarily against 4 stories, but we are simply pointing out that previous planning has anticipated heights of 3 stories typically along the corridor.
Can I
Yes.
ask?
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
haven't read that plan carefully. What was the basis in the build plan for a 3-story limit? Was it the narrowness, the fact that the lots are not that deep?
I think that was a lot of it. I did read through the build plans that pertains to this site. I don't know the history of it as well. Maybe Eileen can elaborate too, but if you look at pages 7, 8, and 9 of the staff report, that's where I took significant excerpts from the build plan. The basis for the three-story height, I don't remember that there was a rationale as to why 3 stories versus 4, but it did acknowledge that some of the lots are not very deep. And there's also a lot of smaller lots. There's not big, larger, unless the lots are combined as is proposed here.
I wondered if that was because it's currently B3 and that's the height limit in B3.
B1, you mean?
B1, sorry, yes.
The height is, under B1 zoning is 35 feet or 3 stories.
And I think it probably also had to do with the depth of the lots. These happen to be a lot deeper than most of the other ones in the
True.
university corridor, so.
True.
4 stories could potentially work if we get the shadow study and.
Yeah, and, the build plan was prepared in 2009. 8 or 9, yeah, completed in 2009. And identified a variety of uses with heights of 2 to 3 stories typically. I didn't see anywhere that they that the plan advocated for 4 stories. But again, does that mean, if you look at I think Van Nutt mentioned this, you look at what's happening in the metro area, Sequoia Commons, Hilldale area, of course, that's maybe a different scale, but Sequoia Commons, and then over by Atwood Avenue, by the Barrymore, there are taller buildings, and in my view, they are fitting into the neighborhood, creating these neighborhood centers, these nodes. And so I think it is possible to have a building that is 4 stories as long as it's properly designed. What we have done in downtown Middleton is, thanks with the Plan Commission's input, is we've had a staggered setback for anything over 3 stories. And so that's been one way to approach this, and one of the Plan Commission members had suggested that approach here. So that's, to me, in an individual conversation, and so that's where our recommendation comes from. The other issues, the other 3 bullets, we did have a meeting, as the applicants noted. We met with our traffic consultant that does the TIA, and we have a concern from our emergency responders about site access. There's a median here that prompts the U-turns, and where the main access to the site would be at where the left turn lane is, westbound left turn lane is to Park Street. And so opening the median there does create some issues, and we want the TIA to address that. Mark Ott referred to a lot of these concerns already and addressed them, but what I meant by standard dimension parking stalls is there are 3 stalls in the basement level that were slightly below our maximum of 9 by 18, and that is a detail that is something that we could address at the SIP stage too. I just felt like, since I noticed it, I should point it out. And then there's the concern that the shared use, the design and shared use of the loading and unloading areas around the accessible stalls. I'm working with the building inspector, who's working with the applicant's designer, to determine whether that's an acceptable way to design those stalls. We are asking for the Plan Commission feedback regarding building design and materials. And also tonight, what I heard, and I think would be a good suggestion moving forward, is that there be a berm or heavy landscaping where the driveway, where cars travel north, and then start the descent down and make the sweeping turn. That driveway is basically there today, but it doesn't extend that far north. It's an existing shared driveway. But I think that's a very valid concern, and could be easily addressed with some fairly minor berming and landscaping. And some of these, again, rise to more of a detail that we can address at the SIP stage. So what we feel as staff is before you tonight is, the question of the concept of the building at 38 units, and how the site is configured with the 57 parking units, plus the 5 that are the surface units, surface lot, which is basically there today, so I didn't include those in the notice. Building height and setbacks, the concept of the mass of the building, all that I think is before you tonight. And we at the time did not make a recommendation to approve, but we also aren't saying that we're opposed to it by any means. We agree with the statements that there is going to be infill. This is an appropriate infill site. We have seen that we've done some successful projects of this size, both in downtown Middleton as well as along our major corridors. Century Avenue, obviously, with the Stagecoach project, and at Lisa Lane and elsewhere. So we are seeing buildings of this size, and actually this is smaller than several of the buildings we've approved recently. So I'll leave it at that.
Any
Elaine, do you have
questions
anything?
now?
I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, but if we, our request tonight is for zoning, so that's a concept review, indicating that the concept of putting this building is okay with us. So the things like making a shorter front and all of that, those can still be discussed after this point, if we would do approval in the zoning tonight, right?
If you would make it a condition of that, because then when they bring back their SIP, then it would need to be reasonably consistent, and if it's reasonably consistent, that needs to be approved. So if you said we would approve or recommend approval to the Common Council of the GIP subject to these things being worked out of the SIP, then that would give them the opportunity to work that out. Able to list the things that could be worked out.
But the GIP rezoning is for the use, the density, the bulk, the traffic patterns, the circulation, the.
So we could also address the setback at that time too, then?
Well, the GIP establishes what the setbacks are, so unless you said to be determined through the SIP, then,
Okay.
anything that we still wanna work out, you should probably.
Yeah,
put
condition.
Okay.
I have some questions about parking.
Sure.
Actually, I have lots of questions, as usual, so. The applicant is not requesting any reduction in parking vis-à-vis our ordinance requirements?
Well, who are you asking?
I'm asking, Mark.
Which Mark?
The applicant.
No, and regardless of, so again, we just real quick, we kept, polishing the drawings in our newest packet. We were trying to get one more unit. We have to work that out, we understand. But regardless of the unit count, we are actually, as we continued from our original submittal, we got up to 2 more parking stalls inside by continuing to polish it. So I believe we're at and maybe 1 stall over meeting city standards. So we're not asking for any reduction.
And the reason I ask is, and this is a constant theme in my discussion of infill projects, is had you considered maybe reducing the number of parking stalls to reduce the cost of the building, given that this is right on a bus line? I think, one of our general plan policy goals is high-quality infill along transit that can reduce demand for automobile traffic, particularly during peak hours, and so reducing parking requirements. And I know Terrence agrees with me on this, that many of our parking requirements are excessive. And so what would that do in terms of your cost structure and going underground, and have you considered it?
Yeah, please, go ahead and come.
And I don't know if your lender requires you to have a certain number of minimum stalls per unit. Yeah.
The lender most assuredly does. We've taken a look at it, right? Again, if we're going to use the built environment to improve the neighborhood, trying to increase density but decrease traffic is one of the things that we're trying to do. The problem we had with forcing it was that complying and qualifying for the WIDA financing has very different criteria than the city might put on it. So the way we came at this was, rather than limit the number of parking spaces, which could impact marketability, which could impact that market study we paid Baker Tilly to make, we decided rather than force it, we would try and encourage the use of bicycles. One of the ways we did that was to create a bicycle room that has a full wash in it. It has stacked bikes. We also put bicycle racks in front of every parking stall. It's just it's a small expense on our part, but it was a means of trying to encourage people to use bicycles, to use public transportation, to otherwise limit the number of times they have to come in and out with cars. One of the other things we've looked at but have not yet determined was the possibility of having a zip car there, having a, for lack of a better word in the gig economy, a shared ride that tenants could come and use if they needed it by the hour. We have Willie Street right across the street, so they have access to fantastic shopping, right? The bowling alley's across the street. We're trying to build a neighborhood. But we decided not to limit the parking spaces as a means of encouraging public transportation, but rather directly encourage it through amenities that encourage bicycles.
Thank you. Yes, David?
Mr. Gray knows my thoughts about three-story building. We've talked about it in the last few days. I agree with Mark that 3-story on the street, to me, seems more than enough. I think the 4-story building will be overshadowing the street, not literally overshadowing, but sort of dominating the street. And I would encourage the thought of cutting the building back at the street edge by 2 units. And he shakes his head. And we have talked about ways of sort of architecturally perhaps finessing it. But I really still think in the end of the day, that would make a lot of people happier about the nature of this development as the first new infill development along University Avenue.
And David and I had an opportunity to have a chat a few days ago, and he kindly offered us a handful of design mechanisms by which we might build into the unit to make it appear less imposing. But unfortunately, I'll have to repeat what I said to David. At a certain level, these things are about numbers, right? The pro forma has to work or there will be no development. Those 2 blighted lots will remain there. You have to make the numbers work. And one of the ways I could have done that, I could cut the height of the building. I could cut off those 2 units in the front, but then I'd have to tear down a mid-century limestone cottage that is just gorgeous architecturally. Like, why lose an asset to the community that if we can make the numbers work and still keep it? And so
Why would you have to take that down?
because I could then add greater density.
Okay.
In other words, I could put units on the other side, which would make up for the 2 that David wants me to cut. And he's made a legitimate argument, but the only response I can give him is the numbers don't work.
Then I would suggest that if numbers are that sensitive, there might be something wrong with the development.
Perhaps, but we've gotten encouraging feedback from most of the professionals who have looked at it, yourself included.
So could you keep on working with David, and maybe there is a possibility that you could restructure it and could have, 3-story up front?
Yeah, we're all through the SIP process. We're going to continue to work with all of you. As I said at the beginning, the goal here is to build something the neighborhood wants, values, and can use, right? There's no benefit to us if people don't like the building or won't live in the building or can't afford the building, right? The whole purpose has to be community utility. So we're going to continue to work with all of you through the SIP process. And David's being modest. He actually had some specific suggestions on the design, at least 2 of which we think are great and that we are going to integrate. One of which has to do with making the sidewalk more welcoming, having a door in the corner of the retail space so that you can enter not just from the parking lot but also from the street. We want to create greater walkability in the neighborhood, and we want to create a place that people consider a destination. We think Willie Street's a great start. It's the reason I was attracted to that block. We now have the Institute inside the cottage, and I don't want to tear the cottage down to try and get more units to make the numbers work. It's a beautiful building.
Other questions? David, you have more questions, or Kathy?
I-
Oh, yes,
Oh,
Kurt.
Kathy? So I'm going to reflect what I hear from some city council people, which is a deep concern about the economic viability of the retail in that location, given the parking challenges and accessibility you're going to face. What would it look like to switch the 2,367 square feet of retail to maybe like either an office use or retail use that's less dependent on traffic? So maybe like, again, like the ones around it, like a chiropractor, medical office, those sort of facilities.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at, Kurt. I would say 2 things about that. Both from the potential tenant side, certainly to the point I was saying about it has to work economically or we wouldn't do it. No tenant who requires a massive amount of parking would consider leasing that. And as a semi-rational business person myself, I wouldn't lease it to any business that needed more parking than we had, because that's setting them up for failure. And failure of the tenants ultimately means failure for us. And Lord knows we don't want that. So we're going to work with the city to choose the proper tenants. Mark has raised this, your Mark, as opposed to my Mark, has raised this issue before about the potential use of the retail. We're going to work with the city, but just know neither I nor any potential tenant has any interest in being unsuccessful. So we wouldn't move anything into that space that didn't fit. There's a couple of businesses I'm not yet ready to talk about because there's actually purchase agreements, but there's a reasonable possibility that I'm going to put the business into that space. We just wouldn't do it if we didn't think it worked in that space. That benefits no one.
Any other questions?
Well, so as we think about this, part
Yes,
of
go
the complexity is we don't have an adopted build plan. And although I've had a chance to review a little bit, and it certainly, if you drive down University Avenue, going towards campus, you will see, I did this again today just to check, outside of the kind of core downtown and the Hilldale area, you do see 4 stories is the dominant pattern, and they're not stepped back from the street, so I'm not exactly sure why that's a problem for a 5-lane street at this facility. I mean, nobody's talking about redevelopment when it converts down to 4 lanes and you have single families on west of Park Street. I know some of the neighbors on that side are worried that development will come that way too. I agree with Van that this is where we see development happening on the corridor. It's part of our comprehensive plan that if we can't do good quality infill along a high-density arterial corridor, we're just gonna have to renegotiate intergovernmental agreements with Springfield and Westport and just gobble up more farmland, so. And that was part of the discussion at Workforce Housing about the idea of particularly singles and twos in close proximity to thousands of jobs and high-frequency bus service, so.
Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, we need a motion.
How wedded, I mean, how wedded are you, David, to having to step back the 3 stories in the front?
I would like to carry on exploring it.
Okay, so you want to make
Well,
that
but
part of the motion then?
Well, the issue is he needs GIP rezoning in order to start to close on his loan.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy with the rezoning, so long as we can carry on talking about some of the issues that Mark has brought up.
Yeah.
There isn't any reason why we can't do that if we attach it as a condition to.
And I wouldn't think so, as long as we have all the conditions.
Okay, so you want to make a motion with those conditions then?
Okay, so I would make a motion to approve the GIP rezoning request, or to recommend approval of the GIP rezoning to council, subject to the following conditions. See if I can come up with.
Get my staff report on the back, might help.
Subject to clarification that this proposed rezoning is for 39 units and requires an additional public hearing. And that the delineation of uses as permitted uses under the GIP be the same as those in the B1 district, and that the conditional uses be the same as those in the B1 district. And that the applicant should consider limiting the front of the building to a height of 3 stories. I don't know if you can have a condition to consider.
Isn't
Correct a motion tonight, that's why.
Oh.
Isn't B1 limited to 35 feet?
Right, B1 is limited to 35 feet, but the uses in B1 would be permitted uses under the GIP. And the conditional uses of B1 would be conditional uses of.
Condition of a condition.
No, so the GIP rezoning would set the height and the use, but the use would
But you're
be,
calling for it to be B1.
Well, the uses in B1.
the uses in B1 be permitted in this PDD as permitted uses. Yeah.
Go ahead.
And what else were the other conditions? That the successful completion of the TIA, addressing of all staff comments of engineering or water resources, or and that there be some substantial landscaping or berming to protect the neighboring property to the north from headlights, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
Don't ask me to repeat
Yeah,
that.
just a minute. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Yeah, you had
I would
it.
just like to note that I think if you're suggesting putting up to 39 within our public hearing, I don't think you can approve until you have that public hearing. Elizabeth Hedrick, Alder 4.
Right, so we can recommend approval to the council for up to 38. You're correct, yes.
Okay. Variance.
Not a variance, it'd be a.
It'd have to be a GIP amendment.
Yeah.
Yeah, which would trigger a Class 2 public notice.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's
Mark,
a,
is part of your motion the setback also from the sidewalk?
No. I mean, we'd hope that the staff comments and the minutes would reflect that there's an interest in still working on this.
okay, any other questions or discussion?
I mean, council can amend since it's a rezoning request, so.
Any other questions or discussion? Otherwise, the motion is as motion made by Kurt, request for rezoning from B1 to Plan Development District with all those conditions specified. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes unanimously.
Should
Yes.
we make a motion to set a public hearing now? Can I make
Yeah.
a motion to direct staff to set a public hearing for 2 weeks, subject to a Class 2 notice for a rezoning to 39 units?
Have to be April 10th.
Have to be April 10th.
Okay,
Subject to a Class 2 notice.
need a second.
Blah, blah, blah.
Second.
Okay, so any questions? All those in favor of this motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. All right, you guys are set. Okay, so the,
So we're done with 2 out of 17 items.
Yes.
At 8:30.
we are on to item number 4, request for conditional use permit and SIP modification, Middleton Gymnastic Academy LLC, 8330 Forsythia Street.
Move approval.
Need a second? Any, you want to show anything or you want to?
Courtney Lang with Fair Builders, and I'm here to represent the new and improved Gymnastics Academy, Middleton Gymnastics Academy. And I don't have a lot more to add than what's in your packet, unless there's questions. I know I have a lot of boards I can get up here.
Why are you moving? Is that being redeveloped, that whole parcel?
No, the lot she's looking at is the one just to the west of
Right.
Kiva.
Yeah.
And the building she's in works, but her business is growing, and it's not
Okay.
quite the right configuration. She needs more of a slightly rectangular building to make it work better. And she wants to build equity and own her own investment.
Any other questions?
Could I just ask if he wants to put as part of his motion about any resolution of any staff comments or any of that kind of stuff?
Sure,
Yes.
we'll include
Yes.
approval of
Okay.
all staff
All right.
comments.
Sure. That's
Any questions? Okay, then all of those in favor of approving the conditional use permit and SIP for Gymnastic Academy, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes, all right, so you're all set.
It's good to see that business vaulting ahead.
Oh, vaulting ahead.
No.
More encouraging.
Okay, we are on to item number 5, concept
flip.
plan for Madison Golf Development Group 8021 Forsythia Street. Go ahead.
Hello, Jean Whitish, LCB LLC this time. The concept proposal is to finally complete, hopefully, the third building on the 10-acre site. So next door to our existing two buildings, which Monsanto, Spectrum, Genetic Visions, and Promega. And then this would be filling out the site. It was designed from the beginning to house it. So we're just here for concept approval, and then we'll be moving through the rest of the process.
Now, this will be the east of those buildings, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
On the corner.
Completes the site, so.
So, what's on that site right now? There's like a little half building?
That's a temporary building from 1998.
I was gonna say, so that would be just destroyed.
Yeah, we would
This,
take
is
that
this an
down.
industrial? They make golf equipment, right?
Pardon me?
What do they make here?
Oh, Madison Golf.
Oh, Madison Golf? Are you talking about Madison Golf?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Madison Golf is one of our businesses that actually, we also own and operate a couple of golf courses. And in the beginning, we had a third course and we had a whole management company for it. And it was also the real estate development services arm. So it was just a management company, but that's also another one of my businesses, so.
So, but you have multiple uses for this building, including.
What's in the building?
Oh, the building right now, the little one that's there?
No, the new one.
Oh, the new one. No, it'll be multi-tenant, flex. So we don't have leases currently at this point in time, but it'd be similar type users to what's been in there.
Uses
And
that
how
are
many,
allowed in the PDD.
how many square feet inside is about 40,000, right? So that
Yes.
could be up to 80 to 100 jobs.
Oh, depending on the user, yes. Yes. Without knowing who, it's
Right.
hard to, we get somebody in there that's a manufacturer or something, then that's possible. But, if you look at the history there, we've had everybody from Catalent Pharma, when they occupied the whole building, to a third wave who was there 3 years and never quite moved in. So,
Is that where the Intuitive Biosciences may be interested in as well?
pardon me?
Is that the Sean Guzzi may be interested in this one too, or? not?
Sean has determined that he is not moving in. He's going elsewhere, and we don't know where.
Oh,
So that's as
Okay.
much as I know at the moment.
okay, all right, we didn't know
So
that.
This does not trigger rezoning.
No, it's
No.
zoned, it's already zoned development
It's zone
district.
PDD, and this fits
Right.
with the use and the,
Finishing is something that was started.
Yeah.
So
and
just
the-
a concept
yeah.
plan, so,
yeah.
I would move approval of the concept plan.
okay, need a second?
Second.
Okay, any questions now? David?
This is a single-story building.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. That accounts for lack of windows in anything up on the upper level, up on the upper band.
Mm-hmm.
But you want that extra height for?
For the uses, flex space typically is 22 to 24
Okay.
foot sidewalls.
Okay, yep, all right. For whoever did your drawings, next time they come before us, please have them show adjacent properties.
Oh, it's concept review for the site, so
On a
yes, we
site-
can.
On a site plan.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Looks nice.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so the motion has been made and seconded. This is the concept review approval for the Madison Golf and Development on Forsythia Street. All those in favor say aye.
All right.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes unanimously. So the next one is a request for conditional use permit for Lycon Incorporated, 8125 University Avenue.
Mayor, I did have some additional information to present. I spoke with the zoning administrator for the Village of Oregon, Jeff Rao. As was referenced during the hearing, they have Lycon is located on the northwest edge of that village. He said that they have been a very accommodating, great neighbor, fantastic neighbor actually is the word he used. The stormwater containment hasn't been an issue, and since they're not really changing the impervious surface of the site, it's not an issue here, I would anticipate either. Noise, they've had no complaints. The nearest housing is 2,000 feet away. Here, the nearest housing is about 1,000 feet away, but it's separated by the belt line, so the belt line actually is a barrier. Dust, they've not had any dust issues in Oregon. So that's my report from Village of Oregon. I also asked the county for any experience they've had recently with concrete batch plants, and I looked at one of the very capable zoning staff there, Hans Hilbert, who happens to be here today in the audience because he misses us. He was kind enough to share 2 sets of conditional use permits, and I looked at the conditions of approval that ranged from 12 conditions on one to 25 or so on another, and just wanted to make sure that if you are so inclined to approve, to grant the conditional use tonight, that I wanted to make sure that we weren't missing anything. And so I'm sorry I don't have this in writing, but what if you are inclined to approve the conditional use, there's 2 before you tonight. One is the height in the industrial business district. That's a conditional use approval. Industrial district, excuse me. And then the other issue is the, I don't have the hearing notice in front of me, and I'm drawing a blank because we had zoning board. Oh yeah, I'll look at the front of my report. There we go. And then simply the idea of expanding the manufacturing activity in the B3 zoning district, which is the eastern portion of the site, and then the height above 35 feet in the industrial portion of the site. You know what? There's a typo. I got those backwards. Sorry about that. Initially, the B3 portion is the western portion of the site.
Yeah.
And I think what I did is I copied and pasted from the zoning, for the zoning board of appeals report. And then the industrial portion is the eastern portion of the site. So I apologize for the typo, but I believe the hearing notice, in fact, I double checked that in the hearing notice, but I will double check it again. I certainly hope that was, I'm sure that was accurate, but I will double check as you're discussing it. So that's what the 2 conditional use approvals are for tonight. And then also, there would be a need in the B3 district to grant a decrease in the setbacks, which is allowed under B3 zoning. And then you'll see that at the bottom of page 12 of my staff report. To approve the new aggregate storage building and overhead conveyor, the Plan Commission would need to allow a reduction in the minimum side setback from 8 to 2 feet on the western B3 portion of the site. It's correct there. And after making determination that the reductions will still provide adequate site area and layout while mitigating negative impacts upon neighboring properties. And then the other conditions that I recommend, that the building design be approved at a future Plan Commission meeting, unless you wish to discuss it tonight and set direction, which I would welcome. But I'm not sure we have a specific enough proposal for you tonight. I would be remiss if I didn't say that we do not have a budget for any sort of enhancements in the form of public art for this project, so there would need to be a funding source for that if there were to be any art. Otherwise, the type of decorative facade that doesn't involve art, we don't have a specific proposal before us tonight. So unless there's some additional material presented here or you have some direction, that would have to be postponed to a future meeting. And then the other conditions would be to make sure that the noise, that there's no increase in noise from the site, and based on talking with Oregon and their testimony at the zoning board meeting, I'm not worried about that. And also I would recommend that the lighting, that there not be any lighting of the building other than above doorways, and that all other site lighting comply with the outdoor lighting ordinance. So that's my staff update.
Okay. Any questions for Mark? Okay. Yes, Kurtz.
So, we are in receipt of a letter from the adjacent property owner to the south, Seiko Foods, which I just wanted to draw your attention
I
to.
didn't.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Did we do that as part of the hearing?
Okay,
I think
thank
we didn't. I meant to say that.
Yeah, it was not included in part of the hearing, but,
Yeah,
Oh.
you should have.
if people need a chance to read that. So this poses a little conundrum for us, right? Because we have a use that predated a lot of the commercial development around it. And both in theory and in practice, I think many of us are very sympathetic to the fact that when people move near a facility like an industrial facility or a farm and then complain about its aesthetics, it's not something that we are necessarily all that sympathetic to. The city plans do show that area potentially for more highway commercial business development, maybe hotels, restaurants and the like. And, you know, we're supposed to consider the comprehensive plan as we think about conditional use permits. But as I said at the last meeting, I'm very hesitant to use the power of zoning to kind of force out a pre-existing business. And many states do in fact have this kind of doctrine of expansion of use. And it's, you know, I'll be the first to admit it's not the most aesthetic entrance point to Middleton. But as the applicant has said, you know, nobody likes to live near an aggregate plant, but everybody likes to use the building materials for the houses they're living in. And so it's a regional serving facility that's nice to have. The rail location is ideal. Getting trucks off the road and bringing things in by rail car is very, very positive. So that's why I'm intending to vote for it, because it's a pre-existing business that's a good citizen, and it's an expansion of an existing business. And I guess, you know, I appreciate Seiko's concerns that they have this Class A facility and they don't want to have to look at an industrial facility, but yeah, I think I've said my piece.
Okay. Any, yes, Cindy?
You know, I have a point of view similar to Kurt's, and I was thinking to myself, because I get the city's desire to redevelop this area and make it a more attractive entrance and all of that kind of stuff. But if we, just make sure I'm right in my thinking about this, if we didn't have this proposal before us, we wouldn't be doing anything with that site. And even if we deny this request, we're not
Yeah,
doing
alternative.
anything with this site right now. So they would continue to do their business in a less efficient fashion, according to what they've told us.
Or
So-
they could store aggregate in piles.
Right, so I would be the first to wish it looked better over there and that something different was there, but in reality, there isn't anything different there. And so I've been convinced that they're a good business and that they operate well and that their neighbors like them. And I just been thinking about this a lot, and I really can't see any reason not to support this request, because it's making what they do better, and the only other choice really is to say no and hope they go away, I guess, and I don't know that we want to do that.
No,
And-
we'd have to.
And Cindy, we have discussed at the staff level, we have discussed with Lycon, since this has, of course, led to the question, are we allowing this intensification of a use, you know, which it sounds like really isn't. It's allowing a conversion to rail, basically.
Yeah.
But they don't have any plans to relocate, but they said they also haven't received any offers for assistance to relocate. And they wouldn't say that that's off the table, but they said that is something that takes several years to bring about, whereas this is a short-term need that meets their immediate goals of the next 3 to 5 years, as they noted there's demand for, you know, obviously this area is growing rapidly, not just buildings, but also road projects. And so they want to be located close to where the demand is.
So what
And
you're saying is one action doesn't necessarily
Right.
cancel.
This represents, they didn't provide this as part of their testimony tonight, but, well, and if they did, I missed it. This represents basically a fraction of the previous investment they've made. And that's, I thought it was also important to know that. You know, as planners, the three of us here, Eileen, Abby, and me, we, you know, always like to see, you know, us moving forward in the direction consistent with our plans, our adopted plans. And we have various plans, as I noted in the staff report, that anticipate redevelopment here. In fact, 8 or 9 years ago, the city applied for a Tiger Grant, as you may all remember, or some of you, if you didn't know. We applied for federal grant funding for developing a intermodal transportation facility, including parking structure that was linked to the railroad and our bike trail system. It was meant to be a multimodal transportation center. And twice we applied for a grant for the site to the east of here, but it would have affected this site too. And that, had we gotten that grant, that would have been a funding source to help implement our vision for the corridor. Right now, we don't have a funding source. That doesn't mean that through TIF, TID 3, for example, that this couldn't become a priority for the city, but at this point, we haven't had direction as staff to move in that direction. I did ask the question in the context of this application, but the two are decoupled from each other. This is, not to use a rail car term, but so I think.
But doing this does not preclude some other action in the future, is what
Right.
you're saying.
No,
Right.
it doesn't.
And
And,
even if we rezone the land to like facilitate the type of business development that we say we want, that would not force the landowner to sell or alter their
Right.
business for 5 years or 20 years.
Right.
I do think it's helpful to say, right, the aggregate storage building is not gonna significantly alter the property value that makes it harder to redevelop. It's basically like a pole building, right? The most valuable is the plant, right? Not the storage building. So it's not as if we're expanding the use by like $30 million and suddenly the buyout cost goes way up.
Right.
It's pretty much just like a metal pole building, right? Concrete. Oh, well. Concrete, there we go. What you? Yeah.
But it's decorative.
Concrete.
well, I see a couple of positives here. It's going to keep the trucks off the road on the damming, and that's, you know, that's a big thing there because it will save the accidents. And the other is they are willing to do some landscaping and also do some art stuff there so that it looks better than what it is now.
Or building.
But I want to emphasize
We
again,
don't have a budget.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Terrence is
Mark
gonna pay
told me
for it.
that was in his staff comments, but I hadn't read it until
He didn't even
just
hear it.
now or fully understood it. But I staff the city's public arts committee, and we have no funding for art projects. We have a very small annual operating budget, and we have a public art master plan and several major projects that we aren't able to fund currently. So I just wanted to point out that there's no funding for a public art project at the Lycon property.
But the Lycon is going to do some of the landscaping to make it look better than
Well,
what it's now, right?
Decorative concrete, there's so many.
Well-
Yes, David.
I think we've gone off.
Track. You were gonna say it. You were gonna say it.
Not intentional though, that one. Theirs are always intentional.
but decoupled wasn't.
I think somewhere along the line we started saying public art. That kind of put it into the hands of the art committee. I'm saying that public art should be private art. It's part
Yeah.
of the development that we are permitting it to happen,
Yes.
so long as something enhances that image from the south side.
Yeah, and I regret using the word public art.
Yeah.
I didn't actually specifically recommend it. I just said a creative way to mitigate the appearance of the stark walls, to use it as a canvas for an art project. And I should have not used the word public, but Abby was obviously right to point that out. And that's why I'm recommending that the decision on what the facade will look like be postponed, but that if you wish to, has there been a motion?
Not yet,
No.
so.
But if there is a motion to approve to grant the two conditional uses, that you make it conditioned on the building design to be approved at a future plan commission meeting. And I guess I hadn't run that by the applicant, but how would you feel about that?
We would like to get the process moving to put out bids and start our process. I think we understood that when we were talking about public art or art, that we would have
that when you were talking about art, that we would have the responsibility to provide that, and that's why we asked for the ability to have a say in how expensive it is. Obviously, we don't want to, you know, I don't see it as being overly burdensome on the project. So we fully expect to participate in that. So.
Thank you, okay.
Would then you be amenable to a condition of the conditional use approval requiring you to submit detailed building plans to the Plan Commission for approval?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, that would not delay your.
Right.
That's what I was getting at.
Okay.
with my
Correct.
Okay, so is that your motion, Kurt, or you're gonna make one?
Unless someone else wants to make a
Okay,
motion.
so who wants to make are we ready?
I can make a motion
Okay.
to permit this activity, subject to what?
To approve the conditional use permits,
Right?
subject to Mark's.
And also the reduction in the side setback, you know, the setback that gives you, the ordinance gives the discretion to the Plan Commission to
Right.
reduce the setback.
Changes to the setback.
Yep. And to grant the conditional uses. And then the conditions that I recommended are that the building design, the final building design, to be approved by the Plan Commission. And no increase in noise, or operation obviously in compliance with our noise ordinance, but basically that there be no increase in noise, dust, and that the lighting conform with the lighting code. All those things are self-evident, I guess.
Okay, need a second.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, so the motion is to approve the request for conditional use permit for Lycon with all other conditions as Mark and David specified. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. Okay, guys, thank you. Okay, the next one is SIP modification for comprehensive sign plan revisions, 8215 Greenway Boulevard. It had come before us last time, and now it's there with some modifications. So who wants to take it on?
Mark had this one.
Mark, you want to take it on?
Yep. And I don't know if anybody's still here for that item. Oh, you are. Wow, he gets a prize. So this is before you tonight. As you recall, you discussed this a month ago. There is a comprehensive sign plan that's been now presented, and it's on your screens. It proposes removing the yellow areas, the upper, what's labeled B at the center of the building. That facade apparently is not visible from the belt line. It's actually on the west. It faces west, so it's on the other side of the building. On the left side, what's labeled A is the curved facade that's there, and they are wishing to abandon that as a location for signage. And then at the bottom, labeled C, they consider that not usable because of the elevation. It's really low relative to the belt line. So they are proposing that the left band of the red band and the right on the right side of the building, A and B in red, that those be the signable areas. The McFarland State Bank sign would fit within that A band. And you've seen that previously. I don't recall if that's part of the submittal this time, but if you remember it, it was fairly modest letters, and we would approve that administratively if you approve this change to the sign plan. Did I miss anything?
Okay,
Recommend approval.
need a second?
Second?
Any questions or discussion?
Or actually, the motion is to approve it as an SIP modification.
Minor
Minor
SIP,
SIP
yeah.
modification.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
The proposed tenant signage was up to 180 feet square before. What is it now? It looks like less.
It's less, yeah. I'm sorry, I don't remember the number. Do you know the answer to that? I don't remember his name.
20 by 2, 40 square feet.
Oh, okay.
Each of them about.
I just knew it was less.
Yeah, quite a bit less, yeah.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, could we add that the lettering be no more than 75% of the size of the facade that it's being put on?
Okay, so is that acceptable to you?
Sure. Is that?
I mean, I'll
I think what,
What's then the basis for 75? That's kind of a standard design rule of thumb that you don't put this lettering over the entire sign area.
not to pick on one of the major food groups, but Hertz Donuts crowds the, crowds the
absolutely right.
space, and that's what
Yes.
you're probably referring to, so.
Two wrongs don't make a right.
Well, in that case, it makes a whole, oh, never mind.
Did somebody say donuts?
Okay,
Just trying to
so,
get a rise out of it.
so is that acceptable to whoever did
Yeah.
the second? Okay. All right, any other questions or discussion? Okay, so then the motion is for the SIP modification for the comprehensive sign plan revision for 82515 Greenway Boulevard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. So the next one is the SIP modification for design review solar project at Middleton Municipal Airport, One Energy Renewables, 8300 Airport Road. Mark?
This is my
Oh,
agenda item.
okay, Abby.
You previously approved a 2-year option to lease land at the Middleton Municipal Airport for a solar project. The company that's developing the project, One Energy Renewables, continues to work with the FAA to get full approval for the project. They also will need to go back before the Airport Commission and the Common Council with the full lease agreement. But they would like to begin construction on the project later this year, so they're kind of trying to go through their checklist and mark things off as they're able to, and one of those things is design review for the project, which isn't likely to be very visible from Airport Road. I actually would prefer it to be more visible because I think it's a really great project, and it will be the largest solar project in the state, at least for a couple of years. So the recommendation tonight is for design review approval as a minor SIP modification, of course, with the understanding that the full lease agreement still needs to be approved by the city council. The permits, for electrical and building inspection, that would still be a requirement for the project. It still needs Airport Commission final approval.
So moved.
Okay,
Approval or?
need a second? Okay, so any,
Can I ask a question?
yes, Kurt?
If it's a minor SIP approval, modification, we approve it. But if it's an SIP modification, a non-minor one, a major one, that goes to council?
It's the same process that's used for, the
For a
original
GIP.
one.
With the hearing notice.
I'm just curious about the term minor because seems it's not a really design review. It's a different use. I mean, I support the project. I'm just procedurally. Do the panels tilt when the sun?
They don't
They don't,
move,
okay.
no. They're
I've seen some that do.
fixed, yeah. Yeah, and in order for the project to move forward, part of the FAA's requirement is that it be related to airport use. So it has to have a relation to the airport use. And the relation that we're discussing, although we don't have it worked out with MG&E yet, who will eventually own the project, is the possibility of getting some of the municipal energy needs for our city operations from the project. I would like to see us get 100% of our municipal energy needs from the project, but we're still working on the details of how that will shake out.
Thank you, Abby. Any questions for Abby? Okay, so the motion was made and it was seconded. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion passes unanimously.
It's a runaway.
Next one is certified survey map, P5 Real Estate Solutions LLC, Strategic Behavior Health, 31659 Deming Way.
And this is a certified survey map that would redivide lots to make the building site for the next few items, discussion, the strategic behavioral health psychiatric hospital. The issue with this is they would be moving some flood storage, and so there has to be a letter of map amendment, because the drainage ditches in the Airport Road Business Park are actually part of the flood storage, and the engineer who has prepared this certified survey map is aware of that process. So it just allows the storage of floodwaters in the Hunters year, so. That is
And
just subject to.
and the loan was required by FEMA.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'll move recommended approval to the Common Council contingent on the appropriate floodplain revision and resolution.
Second?
I was actually gonna suggest that we defer this.
That was-
'Cause what's-
that's where
what-
I was going as well.
Why,
No, I made a motion.
I know. I'm discussing the
bad.
motion. If the concept and the rezoning is not approved, then the purpose of the CSM is moot.
Then they wouldn't record it, it wouldn't be recorded. It does happen sometimes that CSMs are approved and
Oh,
not.
oh, okay.
And not. There's no requirement that they move ahead with it if they choose not to.
Okay. Then I withdraw my concern.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions or concerns? It's only proving,
Yeah, I am. I'm not sure that I do remove my concern, right?
About the CSM.
About the CSM. It is kind of suggesting that this is the way forward. And we haven't discussed whether this is the way forward yet.
so do we want to defer it then?
Want to table it until we talk about the other item?
Or you want to?
Well, that's,
That's fine with me. Either way.
Want to move ahead with it.
so we have a motion.
We have a
It's been
motion.
seconded, so.
Vote on it and
We
Okay.
could vote it down and then
then
defer
start
it.
over.
Yeah.
Or,
Okay, all right, so are we ready to vote then? So all of those in favor of the motion to approve the certified survey map, say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
so I would make a motion to defer consideration of item number 9 until after number 11.
Second.
Okay,
But I didn't know, Gurdeep, how you voted because.
yeah, I voted with,
Okay, so it was 2 to 4.
Or I suppose technically to reconsider item number 9 after item number 11 on the agenda. Motion to reconsider.
okay.
Whatever it's
All
called.
right, so all those in favor of that motion, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? So the motion passes
Get a
unanimously.
second for that?
So do we want to go to number 11 or you want to go to number 10 then?
Reconsider.
Better do 10 first.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, let's go to number 10. This is the concept review for strategic behavioral health psychiatric hospital 3169 Deming Way.
And I could just give a brief staff report
Okay.
from the meetings last night.
Okay,
And then
go
the
ahead.
applicants are all here and prepared to make a presentation. At our city staff recommendation, the applicants hosted some meetings last night here in this room. One was at 4 PM with the daycare that's directly across the street from the facility. One was at 6 PM, and at our recommendation, they invited the entire business park, all property owners within the business park, as well as ETC. And I just wanted to let you know that the meetings went quite well. The 4 PM meeting was attended by 2 daycare owners. The 6 PM meeting, I believe, had 7 attendees in addition to city staff members and the applicants, of course. And it was a really good informal Q&A session regarding the project. And I believe at least some of the attendees are planning to actually visit one of their facilities that's in Green Bay this weekend to check it out. So I think the meetings went quite well and it was really nice discussion. Did you have a flash drive or do you want to plug in? Which do you prefer? Because I can unplug this and plug it into yours if you have a HDMI.
No, I've got a flash.
Oh, you got
I
a
just,
flash? Okay.
how would we?
Well, I can, yeah, we've got a clicker too, but we gotta
Perfect.
plug that in
Works good.
separate. Here. Sorry, I should have gotten this set up here.
And just so we know, this is concept review of a building. The use is permitted.
It's a
Oh,
conditional use.
it'd be a conditional use, that's right.
Yeah.
And
Well,
So the concept review is on the building and the use.
yes, but what we're recommending as a staff is that the PDD was amended
That one, I
several
assume.
years ago to allow medical clinics, just so there's no question or to have clarification. We're recommending, I think Abby's staff comments recommend, that we actually hold a public hearing to amend the GIP to add hospitals as well. so that, because this operates more like a hospital, kind of a cross between a clinic and a hospital.
Yeah, because of the overnight stays.
Yeah, the overnight stays.
As a land use category, is hospital different than psychiatric hospital, or is it
Well,
included?
There was some ambiguity there. I tried to look up the SIC code, and there wasn't, like, there were 200 different categories for medical clinics. We don't have hospitals listed anywhere in our zoning ordinance now. I did discuss this with our city attorney, and I think he felt that medical clinics could adequately cover it, but we thought, well, we don't want to go too far down the path and then have somebody make the determination that this wasn't a medical clinic, and so we thought, while we're setting up the hearing for the conditional use, we might as well just take it along the same timetable.
so.
Yeah.
Okay, so you want to make a presentation?
My name is Jim Shaheen. I'm the founder and owner of Strategic Behavioral Health. We are a behavioral health hospital company. We have 10 operating hospitals around the country. In fact, my 10th hospital opened in Green Bay about 14 months ago and is operating. And we had determined that the Madison area is a really place that really has a great need for what we're offering and what we're trying to do. And so as a company, we went around the country and started looking at places where there was a need for inpatient mental health services. And Madison the Madison area sort of jumped off the map at us, quite frankly, as we've been building hospitals all around the country over the last 12 years. I started the company 12 years ago with an eye to building brand new buildings. You may not know much about behavioral health and its history, but it's been 20, 30, and 40 years since national companies have built new freestanding behavioral health hospitals. And so we wanted to, 12 years ago, wanted to start doing that. My background, I grew up in these facilities from right after college and decided to start my own company about 12 years ago and have been building these ever since. We have a prototype building, which you will see in a little bit. I have the same architect, same general contractor, and we build these hospitals around the country. Just to tell you a little bit about who we are. Based out of Memphis, Tennessee. Don't have a facility in Memphis. It just happens to be based out of there because that's where I live. But are building our 11th facility in Kingsport, Tennessee, as we speak. This will be our 12th facility to be built. Well, actually 13th. We're building one in Bettendorf, Iowa, as well. And what we wanted to do is to truly meet the needs of the communities that we serve. And so when we evaluate the communities, we evaluate where the specific needs are. A little bit about our mission and values. Inpatient behavioral health care is a very intense service for this population. And we're going to talk in this presentation a little bit about why Madison and why this region, and talk about where patients are having to receive care now, and why we think it's important to be in the area, and specifically to be in Middleton. I can tell you the reason we have chosen Middleton. We could build the facility anywhere. The reason we've chosen Middleton is, thus far this community has been extremely supportive, extremely welcoming to us. We get and recognize it's an oddity. You don't see behavioral health hospitals every day, and a lot of people don't know what we do inside those buildings. And but this community has truly supported what we're trying to do. And so I'll let my development person come in and kind of walk you through how we got to this point, and we'll move through this pretty quickly.
Use my cheat sheet here. Sorry, guys. scroll through.
Oh, you have it.
So my name is Mike Garone. I'm the Director of Development for Strategic Behavioral Health, and my role within the organization is to look for opportunities to grow the company and to areas of need. And so most of our growth that Jim described has been organically, and looking at markets with which people's needs are not being met, statistically underserved. And we did a nationwide needs analysis a few years back that looked at several different metrics, including the psychiatric beds per capita for a metropolitan service area. As you can imagine, our facility would serve the region, not just the county or the city with which we locate. We look at the number of psychiatric beds within a particular market, not only just the number of licensed beds, but how those beds are being used. So we look at whether or not the facility is operated by the state. So for example, Mendota Mental Health Institute, located here in Dane County, shows up with a lot of beds in terms of their licensed number, but those beds are not generally available to your community because they're specifically reserved for a forensic population, which is a criminally charged population. So we also look at the number of beds for a particular age demographic. So how many beds do you have for children or adolescents or adults, seniors, and also in the form of beds designed to treat chemical dependency, detoxification services. So we do a lot of different research in terms of identifying the data sets that show market feasibility, right? And then we take it a step further and we go in and start to meet with stakeholders in a particular cross-section, people that actually know what doesn't show up on paper. So how are people accessing care? Are there gaps in services? Do they have difficulty getting patients of a particular acuity placed? Is there out-migration? So are people having to leave their home community to receive care? And we were able to confirm through those meetings with the stakeholders that this market, the Dane County and contiguous counties, has a significant need for what we are proposing. Much of this information is in the detailed packet that we submitted, so if I breeze through some of this relatively quickly, please stop me and ask questions along the way. But some of the details about our project.
I moved you forward one.
Thank you. A freestanding psychiatric hospital that will be approximately 54,000 square feet. The building we're proposing will sit on 7 acres in the Middleton Business Park. It'll offer a wide variety of services on an inpatient basis for children, adolescents, adults, and seniors. We'll also offer services to accommodate those that are chemically dependent. We will accept voluntary and involuntary admissions, as well as offer a variety of outpatient services in the form of partial hospitalization and intensive outpatient. For just a little bit more clarification on what those are, partial hospitalization is like a day treatment program, Monday through Friday from about 9 in the morning till about 4 in the afternoon. And intensive outpatient, if you're looking at kind of the continuum of care, inpatient being the most acute, partial would be a day treatment program Monday through Friday for a couple of weeks, and then intensive outpatient is one step lower on the acuity scale, and that would be 3 days a week, typically Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for 3 to 4 hours during the day. We would also offer free mental health screenings to the community. There are several community benefits, and that's a busy slide. I probably should have pared that back a little bit. But as with any health condition, there is a correlation between treating someone in their home community and having a positive outcome. And we know specifically for the behavioral health population that we have a 68% greater chance of having a successful outcome when they're kept at home. And we can involve the families and the treatment team, get them hooked up with wraparound services once they discharge. We also offer professional recruitment for mental health providers. Psychiatric prescribers they're in a shortage everywhere. You're very lucky to have a School of Medicine here in Madison that, or at University of Wisconsin that has a residency program, and our intention would be to partner up with that school and try to keep some of those residents local to this community. Coordination of care. Although we are a hospital, we only admit about 25 to 30% of those people that come in contact with us. So it's a challenge to try to navigate the behavioral health delivery of care system, and we try to be a resource to community and family members and consumers to try to help them get hooked up with the appropriate services. And then we also consider ourselves to be a champion in terms of education. So we would work with the school district and law enforcement to try to provide trainings out in the community on how to engage with those consumers that are experiencing mental health crisis. We're kind of blending, I know there's separate agenda items. We're kind of blending a couple of things together in terms of the next agenda item, so we'll cover it all here during this presentation. But we do have a significant economic impact. The capital investment is anticipated to be between $17 and $20 million. We are a privately owned and taxable entity that would thanks, I keep forgetting to do that. That would create an annual salary and benefits of over $11 million. And that, I want to make sure to emphasize, that's at full ramp up. So 72 bed hospital, that's not day one, that's once we're operating at or near capacity. Pretty significant job creation. You guys can see there on the slide, operating year one, we anticipate 79 jobs, getting up to a total of 177 jobs in operating year 4. High utility consumption, decrease in cost for law enforcement, mental health transports. One of the large stakeholder groups that we met with was the police department, the sheriff's department, there's a lot of different jurisdictions here in this community. And so we met with several of them, and one of their major concerns is that not only are they having to put individuals in the back of squad cars that are under a legal commitment, which is bad enough, but they're having to drive them all the way up to Winnebago Mental Health Institute. And I've got a slide here in a little bit that shows about how far that is and the volume of individuals that are leaving this community in a given year to receive care. Also, you guys.
How many trips a week, a month are we talking about?
It's close to, in 2016, it's close to 300 in the year. There's a slide, a couple in front of this, that has the actual data that was provided from the sheriff's, police departments. I wish the chief was here to comment on it, but it's growing in numbers. So like I said, one of the things that we make sure to do is talk to people about the needs and not just go off of the data. And so we've talked to a lot of different, what we call behavioral health stakeholders in this community, and they've all, maybe I should give this to you. We've talked to several different large stakeholder groups within the community and the state, and everybody is supportive of the project and wants to see us move forward. I wanted to share with you kind of what our service area would look like. I mentioned earlier that it's a regional provider, right? So these contiguous counties to Dane County don't have a lot of resources, so just like in other healthcare segments, they'll come into the community to receive care for this specialized service. And we do our population demographic based off of a nationally recognized beds per 100,000 formula that's widely adopted by the Treatment Advocacy Center out of Virginia. And they estimate any community to need between 40 and 60 behavioral health beds per 100,000. We use a very conservative estimate of 30,000. And as you can see, when you take into consideration Dane County and its contiguous counties with a population over 1 million people, there's only 102 beds that are available. And there's a lot of out-migration as a result of that. We're asking for 72 beds. One of the other things that's important to understand is the existing providers in this community are, all of the beds are ran by the health systems, and they're typically on a floor at a med-surg hospital. We're proposing a freestanding hospital that have a very different feel and a very different patient experience with different modalities of care, and the physical plant will have a dramatic impact on our outcomes. And lastly, Mr. Reed, the out-migration is broken down by year here, and these are just for those leaving Dane County, not for leaving the region. That was a lot of information to try to get my hands on, and I was able to get Dane County, but as you can see, for the information, most recent information that was available to us, which is 2016, almost 300 people had to leave this community to go to the Mental Health Institute in Winnebago, and that's, considering our patient population, that's a struggle for a lot of families to try to be supportive and be participating in treatment teams and those types of things. So we just want to bring our
Struggle for law enforcement.
It's a struggle for law enforcement
That's-
too, and there's a
That's
dollar
6-hour
amount.
drive, you need 2 officers, pay overtime.
Yes, sir.
And they also have to wait for the patients to be admitted,
Yeah.
and Chuck said that sometimes that takes 2 hours for 2 officers too.
Yeah, so there's human resource, there's definitely a financial dollar amount that could be put on that, and then for me personally, there's the bigger piece is it's just not right.
Yeah.
It's not right for people to have to do that. So I want to introduce Rob Elsner, who's our Director of Corporate Construction, to talk a little bit about the physical plant.
Hi, thank you. As Jim and Mike had mentioned, one of the things that makes us a little bit unique in how we deliver services is a very purposely built facility. Everything about the buildings is intended to provide for utmost patient care, outcomes, patient safety, public safety, staff safety. And so when Jim built the first building 12 years ago, roughly, that was his model, is that we have therapists, we have doctors, we have psychiatrists, psychologists, medical team, and there's an entire treatment team. But the facility is really one of the things that allows us to put it all together. And so when you look at our facility, this is kind of a, let me see, is that one coming up?
It's a big file, it'll take a second to load it.
Oh, okay. It is a single-story, unimposing type building, and when a lot of people think about behavioral health or psychiatric and so forth, they think institution, okay? And that is exactly what we are trying to not have occur. Nobody wants to feel that they're dropping off their family members into a building that's got, barbed wire around it and looks very imposing. That's the behavioral health of old. That's not going to load up, or? I'll go to the next one. There we go. So we, as Jim mentioned, we build a prototype building. If you were to travel up to our Green Bay, Wisconsin facility, you would see the building looks exactly like this. A couple things by building the prototype. One, it's been modified and has evolved over 12 years as our operations team tells us, hey, we've got an idea here. Remember when you thought putting the kitchen here was a good idea? Here's what we think you should do. So the buildings are perpetually evolving, and we've made some subtle changes operationally even to the model that we're proposing. But the physical structures, you can see, single-story slab on grade. It looks like it would be a library, any other type of facility. It does not look like a behavioral health. However, inside the facility, we have lots of things that are provided for patient safety. One of the things that distinguishes us is our effort to address patient safety. Many of the people that are in crisis within our facilities may be intent upon self-harm, okay? And that is a very big concern for us and for their family members. So we take every possible avenue to remove any opportunity for self-harm. That includes how secure the room is. So if you look at this is a very example of a room. Everything is bolted down. There's Lexan over the windows, security screws. There is no points where you can hang anything. Safety hinges, automated security faucets, Lexan mirrors, all while still maintaining a very, comforting environment. It doesn't look therapeutic. There's no bars on the window. We accomplish security for the glass by having 5/8 thick Lexan. So again, our intent is to provide a safe environment conducive to therapeutic treatment that feels more like a big house than it does a behavioral health environment. Let me get you to the, oops, I'm sorry. I think we're fighting each other here. All of our corridors and things, again, are designed with safety and process involved. We have very high ceilings, wide open corridors. The courtyard, as you'll see on the floor plan, is laid out where the building, it goes around an entire courtyard. that allows for us to isolate patient populations, adolescents here, boys here, girls here, adults here, seniors and geriatrics here. We have a full-service dining and a green kitchen, which is a new technology of kitchen that provides higher nutrition without introducing any flame or gases or oils into the cooking, something we're very proud of. But the entire environment has really been designed to accommodate the patient. There we go. We have a full-size gym. One of our things is that our approach to therapy includes recreational therapy, individual counseling, group counseling. We take pride in the varied approach that we have. I mean, some of our facilities, we have therapy dogs, we bring in arts and crafts, we bring in entertainment, they have religious services on appropriate days. So we try to make this as easy an environment for the patients and family, someplace their families will feel safe and that they don't feel threatened in. Again, this is what distinguishes us from so many of our competitors or from the existing environments where it's just a floor on a hospital. We are purposely built. This is an example of a geriatric unit, and you'll notice really high ceilings, wide open area. Nurses' stations in the middle provide access and visibility into all the rooms. Some of the patients here may have dual medical diagnosis, maybe in wheelchair, maybe on oxygen and on walkers. Therefore, you have the wide open surfaces, handrails, and kind of a racetrack approach where the patients sometimes like to wander around. It gives us high visibility, but has an open feeling to it. Again, the whole intent here is to engage the patients therapeutically and not have it feel like they're being confined. However, having said that, the facility is locked down. Every aspect of this building is locked. When you walk in the front lobby, you can't get out without us buzzing you out. There are over 100 cameras around the perimeter and interior of the property. We go to great lengths, again, to make sure everything is safe. Multiple corridor doors, points of egress are all very carefully managed by staff that have keys. So again, while it looks, very, very, therapeutic and so forth, it is highly secure. All of our traffic, yes, sir.
In your 12 existing facilities, how many
10 existing facilities.
10 existing facilities, how many unauthorized exits have occurred amongst your patient population?
So here's the one thing that some of our facilities, we have various facilities in different parts of the state. So for example, this is an acute behavioral health facility. And by acute, it means that we are dealing people in immediate crisis. We consider it kind of like the ER of the medical surgical world. People come to us with a length of stay from 7 to 12 or 15 days. Some of our other facilities are residential facilities where we've had adolescents that stay for 6 to 9 months, a lower level of security and a lower level of kind of patient types that we're dealing with. From our acute facilities, I'm not aware, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, of anyone ever having eloped from an acute facility. Okay. From a residential facility, they're outside playing basketball, a kid decides to run away. That has occurred, but this is not what we're dealing with here, and it's not the type of environment that we're building.
No, and I think for most people, any sort of inpatient or outpatient is fine. It's the involuntary commitment through law enforcement that
Absolutely.
That would be what bothers people.
Yes, and you're quite correct, Jim.
Let me address, Rob said we have not, for as an acute, we haven't had anyone. Let me put that in perspective for you. We treat 30,000 patients a year in our 10 hospitals. So put that in perspective of our buildings are safe. Our buildings are safe and secure, and we've been able to do good work with these patients in this setting.
And you're correct. The involuntary setting, what we call a 72-hour hold, is where medical personnel or law enforcement personnel deem that somebody is, a danger to themselves potentially. And right now, what's happening in your community, they're being taken to the emergency room, and the ERs don't know what to do with them. They end up in Mendota, or they're going up to Winnebago or so forth. We would be able to take those patients. We have a secure ambulance and police entrance separate from our main lobby entrance. They call us ahead, we're coming in. staff meet them there, they're buzzed in, we take them to an assessment area. Of course, we do everything to maintain safety as far as, metal detectors, search, and make sure that they don't have anything with them when they're taken back into the population. All of our staff, 100% of our staff, are trained in something we call handle with care. And what that is, it's a method of making sure that we can, if in the event if it's necessary, restrain carefully and safely a patient without presenting danger to themselves or to staff. Now that handle with care training is something that we renew annually, and it doesn't matter if you're in the kitchen, janitor, or maintenance, you get that training, because the reality is that 100% of the staff are in the environment of patients, and at any point in time have to be able to respond. And so one of the things that we discussed with the police chief is that, and he validated in our facility in Green Bay, we don't call the police when we have an unruly patient or something is going on. We are not going to be increasing calls for service by the local law enforcement. We deal with those problems in and of ourselves. Now, that doesn't mean we have giant security guards and towers and concertina wire and those kind of things at all. No, it is quite the opposite. Our staff are trained in how to diffuse, redirect, and positively take control of the situations without it being a physical combat situation. So we pride ourselves very much on that. And granted, public safety, whenever anybody thinks about this, what comes to mind is criminal patients, okay? This is not what our facility is typically about. These are your friends, neighbors, families, the people that are already in your community. We are offering them a localized, easier choice to deal with this. So we fight that stigma quite a bit, where somebody thinks that this is something they saw on TV and whatever people believe in to be behavioral health.
So the patients brought by the police, they're kept in a separate part of the facility, right?
No.
They're not.
They are when they come in. The police
Initially.
have their own entrance,
Mhm.
and ambulance have a separate entrance. We get a lot of patients by ambulance. We get a lot of patients directly from the ERs into our facilities, and so they're transported to us by ambulance. And so we have an ambulance bay, and the police also use that. They go directly into our admissions area. One of the things the police chief and those guys had mentioned about waiting for several hours at Winnebago. Once they step foot in our building, we take possession of the patient, and the police can go and protect the public like they're supposed to be doing, and not tied up waiting in our waiting room. And again, your police chief spent some time, knows some police chiefs and folks up in Green Bay, and really vetted all that out. The nice part is we do have 10 hospitals operating. We do, you can call these communities and talk to them about how we operate and what we do. A lot of the stakeholders that we have met have done that because we're very proud of what we do, number one, but number two, we want to be a good community resource, and that's what we've been able to be in our other communities.
Thank you.
One last thing, just in back to the building plans and so forth. We have classrooms in the building because we will be taking various populations that are segregated: children, adolescents, adults. So we have different areas of the hospital. When they are transitioning in the corridors, the children never get close to an adult. They're kept out of line of sight, out of audible. The cafeteria and dining schedule is managed to make sure that they don't cross paths. Everything is done to utmost security and patient privacy. So if you walk around our building, you can't look in and go, hey, look, there's Fred. Everything is the windows are frosted. We have interior courtyards that are secure that we use for outdoor activities, recreational therapy to get the patients outside, get them in the sun. So again, we feel very proud of the therapeutic offerings that the building allows us to take place. So this is a picture of the classroom. If you'll hit the next one for me. This is the floor plan, the concept drawing that we have, and if you'll see, Deming Way is on the left. As you noted, the CSM is actually allowing us to take part of one lot and a piece of another one to allow this to be a 7-acre site. We're fortunate enough to have local resources familiar with the site. D'Onofrio and Kotke and Bruce Holler drew the plan for us, and as our local engineer, we've also utilized local soil engineers, Mike Schultz from CGC Inc. And while we do have our own general contractor and architect that we take these plans around with, we do want to point out that all of the trades and materials are obtained locally. So, you know, when we're looking for plumbers, electricians, drywallers, et cetera, those are regional resources that we bring to us. So what you're seeing here is the initial plan of the building, 72 beds, 54,000 square feet, and it actually allows us to create some expansion. On the little L shapes that you're seeing, we have the opportunity to expand on 2 of the little L's to add another, to make it 16 additional beds. And then we have also in the upper corner where the parking lot is, there's kind of an open area. We have space there for an 8,000 square foot outpatient building. As Mike had alluded to, we have, you know, several levels of care, the acute inpatient being first, partial hospitalization as a day program, and outpatient. As those programs grow and as the community's demands increase, we have created space here to not only grow the inpatient portion of it, but to create a 9,000 square foot outpatient facility on this same parcel of land that allows us to continue expanding our services.
Where would that be?
The outpatient portion, let me see. So as you're looking at the plan, the parking lot, directly above the parking lot, there's a big open area. If you're looking at the parking lot left, following it along Deming Way, there would be a building kind of perpendicular. Yes, exactly there.
Okay.
That rectangular space would allow for additional parking and 9,000 square foot building. The
But the application before us is just
72 beds.
72 beds.
Yes, I'm just merely commenting on the site plan as it sits and as it's related to the CSM, that it allow for us to not only build the initial 72-bed hospital, but does incorporate the potential opportunities for future growth.
Do your patients include sex offenders?
They do not. We do not have any treatment program for that whatsoever. That's a question that's come up in the public meetings a couple times, and it's a definitive no. We do not treat or have any type of facilities where we would take sexual offenders. Any other questions related to the site of the plan? Otherwise, I'll let Mike talk about, like I said, there's kind of 3 agenda items here, the CSM, the TIF, and the conditional use, so they're all kind of rolled together. So however you guys would like to process. Ma'am.
Can I just ask a question about how you're a privately owned entity, but you must have to go through the licensing?
Absolutely.
How does all that work?
So the state of Wisconsin comes and, number one, they approve the building step by step. They come see the building all while it's being built. It has to meet hospital standards, which are pretty strict. In fact, I have to meet the same standards in my building as the large med-surg systems that you see. We're licensed as a hospital. And so as we build the building, they approve that process. That's the first step. The building is now ready to be licensed. Then the licensure comes with a series of folks and do a survey and make sure our entire policy and procedures, our staff are hired, our staff are trained and ready to take patients.
So you're no different than any other hospital here?
No different than any other. That's right. What you
as a hospital, are you eligible for the Hospital and Health Financing Agency in the state?
You mean the Medicaid population? Is that what you?
No, there's a hospital financing agency which can issue bonds for below market financing for private. No, because you're private?
It's private, but I don't think it's something we.
Okay, but you do take Medicare and Medicaid.
We take. Well, let me say this: we take everyone, regardless of their ability to pay. Okay, and you know, a lot of times people hear the word for profit and say, oh, okay, they're just going to take payers, and when the indigent are, they can't go to the facilities. Absolutely not true. I have 10 hospitals that do it every day. I have a hospital in Green Bay that's been doing it for 14 months. We take every person that comes to us that's appropriate for that level of care. If they're not appropriate for the level of care, we don't just say to them, hey, you don't need our care, we'll see you later. We help them get to exactly where they need to get to. Because I'm telling you, if you've ever tried to navigate the mental health system, it's extremely difficult. We get paid to navigate the system, and we struggle with it. Imagine a layperson. So we take on the responsibility of helping people get where they need to get to in terms of services. Because when they reach out to us, they're in crisis of some sort. May not even be a mental health crisis. It could be a financial crisis. and we help them get to exactly the resources that they need to. And that's part of why our commitment to the community is to be a true community resource by being able to do that regardless of whether they need to be in our care or not. What you'll see on the screen, I think, is the soil remediation. Most of you probably know about this piece of land and its troubles around. This is our first time learning that you could actually put styrofoam and build buildings on that based on the soils.
Yeah.
But it's costing us $1.7 million additional than it normally does for us to build a hospital. But so that's part of where this TIF request is coming from.
And that leads into my question. You said Middleton was truly supportive of the facility. What happened in Madison?
What do you mean?
Well, you said you had a choice between Madison and Middleton as a final choice for sites.
Sure. Nothing happened in Madison other than we chose Middleton and stopped talking with Madison.
How important was $1 million of TIF funds to it?
It's important. I'm spending $20 million total to do this project. It's a significant attractiveness to us, for sure.
Am I correct in saying you probably wouldn't get that TIF support in Madison?
No, we didn't even get that far down the road with those folks. So, I mean, let me make sure we put this in perspective.
They might.
We're coming to the area. We've chosen Middleton to come, but we are coming to the area. There's a definitive need here. We have been so welcomed by Middleton and so encouraged is why we stopped talking with the other folks and decided on this Middleton piece. It is costing me $1.7 million than it normally does, but we still think it's a good project. This is a great place to be, and so we're encouraged.
Let me add something to the specific reason for
You got to use the mic for
the video.
the recording.
The specific reason for the TIF offset also is because this particular lot requires something that, let's say, the lot we were looking at Madison wouldn't. Okay, so when we're talking about getting, the 1.7 is above and beyond what we would normally have to do to a lot from a civil perspective to build our facility. So when we go to Madison, that particular site that we were evaluating doesn't need 1.7 worth of additional work. So it's an offset to us in a certain extent.
Did you choose this site?
Yes, of course we did.
And you knew what the conditions were?
Yes, we did. Yes, absolutely. I mean, we cast a very large net, and no, this is not a surprise to us, but in order to be here and to choose this site, this is kind of what we're looking for.
Okay, so you're saying your building on this site is dependent upon TIF?
Any building on this site would be dependent on TIF.
Not just them.
Yeah.
Anybody would have.
Kiva, I mean, all this stuff. It's
Done it for others.
And I know we're not on the agenda item for the TIF, but I just wanted to mention they've discussed a couple of numbers, and one was 1.7 million, which was the TIF request initially. We asked our TIF engineer, Tom Stetzer, to review the numbers, and he felt that the extraordinary soil costs were more appropriate at about 1.45 million, which he just felt that the unit costs for some of the items that are being displayed on the screen were high, and we wanted to make sure we were looking at it conservatively. So he said he felt the TIF eligible soil costs were 1.45 million. Our staff is recommending 1.18 million. Part of the reason for that is we felt we could still be competitive at that level. We didn't feel like we needed to incentivize the full amount of extraordinary costs. So our recommendation is for 1.18 million in TIF.
Developer finance TIF.
Exactly, yeah.
Where the developer
Any other
finance
questions?
is not, an interest rate charge is not included.
Interest, yeah.
No, we finance it internally.
Okay, so that's done for the presentation then?
Sure.
Okay, so we are on to item number 10, concept review.
Did you guys understand the discussion about the conditional use, adding hospitals as a conditional use and then having them apply for the conditional use permit for a hospital? Was that all clear? Because that's a little confusing. I just wanted to make
Well,
sure.
then there
Would
would
it be-
have to be a public hearing.
Yes.
So what we're talking about now is just the use and the concept of the,
It requires
Right.
2 public hearings, one for the GIP amendment
right.
and one for the conditional use permit.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep,
those are
that's
item
correct.
number 12 and 13, so.
And the GIP amendment was just to make a hospital conditional use on this parcel.
Correct, yeah, okay, I
A
got
lot
it.
of times when there's a future public hearing required, and in this case too, a lot of times I think what the plan commission does is just give feedback and maybe a consensus, and I have to look at what the recommendation is, but, you know, I think that
The
that's-
recommendation
and- oh, yeah,
was
yeah.
provide feedback to the applicant and recommend concept approval if the plan commission feels comfortable.
Yeah, because concept approval is not binding on the city, it's just,
Right.
it's just a showing that you're going in the right, they're going in the right direction.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? It's only the concept approval.
I think the site design from a concept is good, and the use is certainly something that's needed. I mean, a lot of us have done the Citizens Police Academy through our police department, and we do ride-alongs, and I did one with the UW Police Department. And this was one of their big concerns, is because even on our ride-along, we interacted with someone clearly in need of some mental health service, and the officer would think that's 8 hours at least, up to Winnebago, 2 officers, just, it's, yeah, and it's really hard on the patient, so. I mean, I think when the citizens of our community are given the information about security, I mean, that's obviously everyone's immediate concern, is security of the involuntary population, but, you know, I think the way you presented it is very persuasive and helps to kind of counteract those stereotypes, so.
One of the questions which I have is, when the police is taking those folks to this facility, they are in handcuffs, but when they come to you, you don't really feel any need of handcuffs or any of.
No, and quite frankly, that's at police discretion in terms of how they transport given people. In a lot of cases, these folks have not done anything criminal in any form or fashion. They're in a mental health crisis. So the police certainly can choose not to handcuff them. That's their choice. When they get in my building, they're unhandcuffed. We're a therapeutic building, and we take care of patients. They haven't done anything wrong. They don't need to be handcuffed. But I will say, in the police department, they have their right to how they want to manage those folks. Part of what we spend time doing is spending time with the police, quite frankly, training on these patients and what the better interventions might be, rather than a correctional kind of bent in terms of a way you approach a particular mental health patient. And so we do a lot of trainings with police departments on that, but it is ultimately their decision. But once they step foot in our building, there's no need for those handcuffs.
And you would not house forensics
No, we will not, house.
Those are people who have been court ordered.
Yeah, that's a completely, in fact, that's what Mendota does.
Yeah.
And they've removed all their other beds so they could solely do that.
They used to accept kind of involuntary emergency detention.
Absolutely did.
And they closed
As
that.
Winnebago does.
Yeah.
And so no, we absolutely do not do that.
You made a comment that you would accept anybody. Somebody asked you about funding sources, Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance, all that kind of stuff. I guess I'm kind of curious about what keeps you financially stable. You have to be paid by somebody for what you do.
Sure. For some counties, sometimes the counties pay us for those patients. Sometimes they don't, quite frankly. Part of our national study is about looking at the entire population and are the percentages of different populations where the financial model works. And I can tell you in every scenario that we've done in the last 12 years, it works. It just does. It happens every day for every healthcare system. You get a reimbursement from Blue Cross Blue Shield significantly higher than you do from a Medicaid or even an indigent, and you blend them together, and it's okay.
One
Yeah,
of
go
the
ahead.
things that I learned last night at the meetings that I thought was really neat is they talked about how they go out into the community and they do training to destigmatize mental health issues, and they talked about like going into the schools and doing like anti-bullying training, but also training teachers to recognize symptoms of depressions in kids and teenagers.
Yeah, suicide prevention. Suicide prevention, we teach the teachers how to look for those symptoms so that we can prevent suicides.
And I was giving an update of the meetings to our library director this morning, Jocelyn Sansing, and she looked up their website and she said, "Oh, this is the same place that's in Colorado Springs." And she came from a library district there, and she mentioned that you guys had partnered with their library district to do trauma training after the Colorado wildfires. So it was a really good example, real life example of a time that they had done it.
That was, that hospital's my third hospital I built in Colorado Springs. It's a
You had some,
Well, all I was gonna say was the reason that I supported it, and I think the rest of the staff, I don't wanna talk for them, but is because these are our neighbors and friends that
Yeah.
will.
They absolutely are.
okay, any other questions? So the motion is for the concept approval. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so the motion passes. So the next one is you want to take number 9 or want to go?
I know. Evelyn just texted.
Huh?
Up to you, it could be the tip
Then-
or it could be the.
Okay,
CSM.
let's move on to number 11, so,
That's the TIF.
yes. Request for TIF.
So it's a recommendation for developer finance TIF assistance in the amount of 1.18 million for extraordinary soils costs. Like I mentioned, we had our TIF engineer review these costs along with current bid tabs. He felt that the extraordinary costs were higher than what our staff is recommending. The percentage of the increment applied to the project is 55% under this scenario, with 45% going to the general benefit of TIF 3.
So moved.
Can I, oh, okay.
Second.
Okay,
Okay, go ahead, Kurt.
No, I was
Yeah,
just
go
gonna
ahead,
ask
Jeff.
where we come up with the 55% on a developer finance TIF.
yeah, I would have liked 50-50, but this is a lot better than what we have done for other facilities.
Well,
so.
I mean, I think I would argue that on a developer finance TIF, because it's a developer finance TIF, you wanna go higher percentage to the project to pay back the increment
Yep,
sooner, because he's bearing the finance costs,
so
so.
55 is okay,
mean,
so,
I know that staff have worked on it, I don't wanna nitpick it, I would go up to like 75 or 80 on a developer finance TIF, but that's just my little hobby horse, so.
I'm happy with 55-45. I have a question about additional undercutting for building and parking lot. What is undercutting here?
The undercutting, so basically the issue out there is the instability of soil to support the foundations for a slab-on-grade building. And so undercutting is basically going in and removing unstable soil up to X number of
okay.
feet, backfilling it with a certain amount of soil that will compress. And in this instance, what has been done and is done on the sites adjacent to us, including the UW Pharmacy and the distribution center, is the use of something called geofoam, which is basically a giant block of styrofoam that absorbs and compresses as the site moves, so it doesn't transfer anything into the building in which you have slab-on-grade cracks and building destabilizing. So this is a matter of mitigating soil, digging down, putting in new soil, putting in geofoam, building the structure on top of it.
Okay, thank you.
Will you be doing any surcharging?
There are portions of it that are already surcharged out there, and we take that into account with our soils engineer and our structural engineering. But the amount of time to do surcharging really wouldn't allow us to do it any further. So in an effort to get the project moving, and obviously we're interested in getting through this process and building this facility as soon as possible, surcharging is probably not the most efficient way to do it at this point. There is some existing surcharge piles on there, so that was what was in the TIF as well.
Okay.
So your application, the economic component says that the capital investment of 17 to 20 million. Yet I see a anticipated project value of only 10.5. in the TIF request. That's $9.5 million of increment that's not accounted for in the development agreement here.
You talking about the assessed value?
Right, I mean,
But you're probably including the salaries of the employees and.
no, it's capital of so a capital building of 17 million ought to assess for at least 17 million.
There's a lot of, this is Mike Garone, Director of Development. The 17 number includes the
Includes
land
all the
cost,
land and soils? Okay.
the soil remediation, the vertical build, the design fees. So there's a lot that, not just the actual vertical build that goes into that number.
Got like 7 million in soft and land costs.
Well, no, we don't. I guess we just, we tend to be fairly conservative when we do things, and so to say that 10 million is,
Okay.
you know, but the reality is, yeah, when we're done, it's a $20 million value, probably. We just like to be conservative and not disappoint, basically.
And I think our city, part of our process too is to take the building plans to our city assessor and have him determine what he feels the assessed value is. And I think he tries to be conservative too, especially when we're dealing with the TIF project, to make sure that, you know, we're not over-promising the amount of increment that's gonna be available.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so the motion is to approve the TIF for 1.1.
Conceptually.
Conceptually, yes.
And
So, yeah, and recommend to the city council. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so now let's go ahead and do number 12 and 13.
And just for the record, I would go higher on that TIF if the costs are, given the,
Not higher on the dollar amount, but higher on the split.
I would go higher on the dollar amount too. I'd be willing to, given the projected increment.
I like to keep it where it is, but let's, you want to deal with the number
We'll see
item
the
which
final
was,
numbers.
you want to reconsider number 9?
The certified survey map?
Yeah. Or
Yeah, do
should
we need a motion to reconsider?
I think you already, well, I thought we already had that, sorry, I'm getting tired, but I think.
Either way, let's, motion to reconsider item number 9, now that we've,
Okay, need a second?
Second.
Okay, so all those in favor of reconsideration say aye.
aye.
Anyone opposed? So now you want to make a motion too.
Do you wanna make the motion again?
No.
Okay, I move to approve the CSM.
Okay, need a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of this motion for the certified survey map for T5 real estate
Contingent
solution?
on the staff.
Yeah,
Contingent on staff,
contingent of
resolution
staff
staff
comments and
comments.
stuff, say aye.
And Fletcher.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay,
Did you vote against it? Or you-
Yes.
Yes.
we are on to item number 12 to set the hearing date for April 10th for the GIP for the Airport Road Business Park to add the hospital as a conditional use.
I move we set the hearing for April 10th at 7:05 p.m.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the next one is item number 13, set a public hearing request for conditional use permit for a hospital in the Airport Road Business Park, lots 2 and 3.
Move-
Move that, set it for Tuesday, April 10th at 7:10 p.m.
Yep.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor of this motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. Now we are on to item number 14, that's the proposed general implementation plan amendment, the community of Bishop Bay, the back 9 neighborhood increased density,
And I have,
amending member number 3, Eileen.
I'm just gonna pass that out if you wouldn't mind.
I
Thank you, guys.
I know. I wanna give Terrence one of these. Terrence, can I give you one of these? Do you need? So you have a memo? It's just, if you have, oh, okay, well, I have. I just made some extra in case anybody.
What's this about? We've never seen this proposal before.
Yeah, okay.
if you're okay with that.
Okay.
So I just wanted to walk through that.
I thought of that joke and then I thought, that's probably out of bounds. If we keep dragging on your project, you're gonna be the patient number 1.